You don't mind standing for the acknowledgement of country, diversity commitment, service acknowledgement and prayer. The City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Ramangiri and the Narrangiri people, the traditional custodians of the land and surrounding waters. We acknowledge their deep connection to country and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging leaders. This respect is extended to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia. If somebody would like to diversity commitment. Thank you, Marilyn.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, religions, beliefs, cultures and backgrounds.
Thank you. Service acknowledgement. Councillor Byrne.
We recognise the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation. We remember those who have lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Thank you. And the prayer. Councillor Mann.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. We have one apology tonight, and that is Councillor Quinton, but everybody else is here. David Kemp may be a bit late, but he is planning on joining us. So we actually have an adjourned item, which, as you know, goes first. But what I'd like to do, because the adjourned item relates to a number of items in the agenda, and those items actually provide further information for the adjourned item. I'd like to, so that you can make an informed decision regarding the adjourned item, because I think it was adjourned so that we could gather more information. So what I'd like to do is bring forward items 5.1, 6.1 and 13.1 before the adjourned item, and that will provide us with the information that we need to discuss item 4.1 in a way where everybody knows what's going on. And I would like, so can I please, to enable us to make an informed decision, can I just have a raise of hands that you don't mind going forward? Thank you very much. So we will now move to 5.1. And 5.1 is the minutes of the previous meeting of the 28th of October. And I understand that Councillor Schiller will move a different motion to the recommendation that is currently there. Councillor Schiller, would you like to move your motion?
I'll be moving the recommendation, but also in 8.1, which is the item that we're discussing again this evening. In the minutes, it states that we were receiving and noting the petition for as regards to the Cudmore Road footpath, but there was an additional motion, part of the motion put in at the beginning of the motion, which recommended to administration to retain the footpath at the boundary where possible, which was moved by myself and seconded by Stuart. So just, this is not to do with that particular issue, it's just to amend the minutes to show the correct minutes, and I picked it up a couple of days after the minutes came out.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that the CEO has checked the recording of that and you were right. So the motion would read that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on Monday the 28th of October be confirmed as true and accurate, subject to the following amendment: that Council receive and note the petition, proposed footpath of Cudmore Road, McCracken report and attachment, and that administration retains the existing design, which includes taking the path along the property boundaries where possible. Is that's correct? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation that includes that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Are there any other questions in relating to the minutes? No, I'll then go to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now go to 6.1. And 6.1 is the deputation. in relation to the Cudmore Road footpath. Bob Rossiter, you are here. Bob, thank you very much. Nice to see you again. If you don't mind taking a seat up there, Councillor Karemba may be able to show you where to sit and how to operate the microphone. You will have 10 minutes for your deputation. You'll have 10 minutes for your deputation, Mr. Rosser, and that will include question time. If you can please speak into the microphone, that makes it much easier to hear, especially for people that are watching online. And I'm sure you have a lot of people watching online and very interested in this item.
Thank you. My name is Bob Ross. I live at 79 Cudmore Road, Victor Harbour. Early October, I received a letter, as did other residents in Cudmore Road, from Michael Ross, I believe, stating, our letter stated that the council proposed to put a footpath at the front of our premises on the boundary. I was surprised with the fact that they were talking of boundary. It's not something I thought would be applicable. It came to my attention, subsequently came to my attention that houses on the western end of Cudmore Road received a letter, and their letter stated that the footpath would be on the curbing. That same letter was given to residents on the northern side of Cudmore Road. The question why the western end of Cudmore Road is getting a footpath on the curbing, that extends for 6 houses. There were 6 houses that received those letters. It's about 100 metres. I've looked at the area. In fact, there are photographs which are supposed to be shown. And I queried with someone in council, and they said that there surely would be a significant tree or something of that nature in that region. There isn't. It's a clear footpath. Mayor, are the photographs available or not of the footpath?
I would have to ask about that, but it's your deputation.
Yep, fine.
Go ahead. We can get them.
I did send them in by email, and I was assured that they'd be shown because I'm a firm believer in believing that the picture tells 1,000 words. And the emails, the photos clearly showed that on the curbing is perfectly clear. Now, as a result of these letters, I decided that I'd speak to other residents in Cudmore Road, 22 of which I spoke to. Every person agreed that the footpath should be on the curbing. I organised a petition, which I've got a copy of and which I believe you have received, and every person signed the petition. The elements that came to fore from the residents were that the area on Cudmore Road is an established area. It's been there for decades. There are garden displays. There are borders, pavers, cement, all on the front footpath. All on our boundaries and not extending onto the footpath. I suggest that if the footpath is on the boundary, that it'll impede on those things and make it very difficult. I personally have got a kidney display where I've got ornamental trees. If that path is against that kidney display, it's going to look quite unusual. I'd much prefer it was out on the boundary. While I spoke to persons, they were also concerned about an invasion of privacy. If the path was out on the boundary, it would be well away from our front yards. The footpath in this area is 5.5 metres wide, so it's substantial. There's a lot of room there. If the persons, pedestrians, are on the curbing, it's a good distance from our front yards. Other issues were, I've mentioned privacy. People were concerned that people would be walking basically on their front yards. They also raised the concern about if there was a buffer 1.5 from the boundary, that would leave 4 metres. There were concerns that that 4 metres, because people would think it's divorced from their land, wouldn't care for it as they do at the present time. You've only got to travel up Rapid Drive, the northern end of Rapid Drive, to get examples of this. There are situations there where the buffer is knee high in weeds, and it detracts from the appearance. I did speak to someone from council. He raised concerns because I said to him that Rapid Drive, the western end of Rapid Drive earlier this year received a footpath, and that is on the curbing. He said to me that there'd been numerous complaints made about the location of the footpath. In response to that, I went to Rapid Drive. There's only 16 houses that received that footpath earlier this year. I spoke to numerous of those persons, and not one could tell me that there'd been any complaint to council. There was one councillor, there was one resident at number 88, a local businessman. He spoke to council complaining, but his complaint was about the boundary. He thought that the path was impeding on his property. So my view is that those complaints are ill-founded. The residents in Rapid Drive don't back up the fact that this council employee said to me that there are complaints received. As I said, I spoke to all residents in Cudmore Road. There were 22 houses. A representative from every house signed our petition. The petition says that we want the footpath on the curbing, not the boundary. I believe there are good reasons why, and I've tried to explain those hopefully successfully. We would like the footpath, if we to have a footpath, then we would like it on the boundary. Sorry, on the curbing. I don't know how much
Sorry,
time
I'm confused. You want it on the because you said you want the footpath on the boundary, not the curbing?
No.
You want it on the curbing, not the boundary?
On the curbing, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's also the element of expenditure by the council. If they chose to put it on the boundary, there are numerous cement NBN lids. There are Telstra lids. Every house has got an ENWS plate out the front, a steel plate. All those things would have to be boxed up and left so that they could be accessed by the services that those things are concerned with. These things would be an unnecessary expenditure by council. If the footpath followed the curbing, it'd be a matter of boarding up one side and job done.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. My understanding is that questions are included in my 10 minutes. So
They are. So I see Councillor Karemba's got a question. Councillor Mann's got a question. Councillor Schiller's got a question. Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming down, and I commend you because a lot of people complain, but very few do something about it. You've actually gone out and spoken to your fellow neighbours, and they're all concluded that this is what you're after, and I've made it clear that I think we should support you. Do you feel like you're not getting heard? Do you feel like you're not getting listened to by the council?
I'll tell you that after the result of the council, I reckon.
Yeah.
But I didn't get I don't know that I got a terrific response from the manager of operations. He seemed to be pushing the boundary to me. It's a shame that the photographs aren't here because if you were to look at the location, the curbing is absolutely clear of any obstacles.
Yeah.
And it's really, to me, common sense to put the curbing 1.5 metres on the curbing.
Thank you. Is that your question answered, Councillor Creamer? Thank you. Councillor Mann?
Yeah, thank you, Bob, for coming down. I'm not sure whether you tuned into some of the discussion last month around this item. I guess what I would be interested in is my perspective, I see the pros and the cons of both sides of the argument. I guess the simple solution that jumps out to me is whether it's not directly on the on the curb, but there's enough room to allow for the occasional bin to be put out. What I was wanting from the consultation and what you can answer tonight is whether if the choice was between having it on your boundary or maybe allowing, half a metre or a metre or a sufficient space to put the bin out, it's not the full 4 metres that you've talked about, that big buffer, just a smaller buffer. How would your view be around that?
Well, my preference is that it should go to the curbing. I mean, it's proposed 1.5 metres for the curbing. If there's an argument about the bins, which are actually 70 centimetres wide, then it's a 1.5 metre. There's adequate area, even if a bin is on that path, there's adequate area for people to pass without hindrance.
Sorry to interrupt, Bob. Just to clarify, if the option is it's along the boundary,
yep,
or it's maybe half a metre or something off the curb,
yep.
What is, I guess?
What's my preference?
Oh, sorry. I know your preference is for off the boundary.
So my preference. Sorry, councillor. Yeah. So definitely my preference is curbing. If that's not to be, then the buffer, like you say, of a half a metre or something for the bin to sit in. I mean, everything seems to revolve around the bins. I don't know how far the arm on the truck extends. I do know in my area that if it's blue bin day, or recycle, the yellow bin, those bins are generally picked up about 5:30 in the morning. And we're all old farts down there, well, majority of us. And it's amazing how many people, as soon as the bin's emptied, that's brought in. And then the footpath's clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
Thank you for coming and doing your deputation today. My question is, at our last meeting, we had a quite detailed discussion of why the pros and cons of the two types of curbing. Did you listen to that particular meeting, or were you attending that meeting? Because there's a lot of information within the discussion we previously had, and there will be in the following discussions, and I'd just like you to listen to what's been said later and then form your opinion.
Thank you. I haven't, to answer, if there was a question there, I haven't been privy to the other council meetings or what was said previously. However, I do notice the photos are now up, showing the curbing. That photo there is taken from the front of my house looking.
Thank you. I'm very sorry, Mr. Rosser, but your time is well and truly up. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, so we now move to item 13.1. And 13.1 is the minutes of the council committee meetings, the Special Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting. And that meeting specifically discussed and looked at the proposed footpath on Cudmore Road from the perspective of disability access and inclusion. I can take that recommendation on block if somebody wants to move it on block. No, you'd rather do it separately. Thank you. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the minutes of the Disability Access and Inclusion meeting. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. Do either of you have any questions about the minutes? Anyone have any questions about the minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Number 2 is that the proposed footpath on Cudmore Road between Rapid Drive and Lamont Street be constructed at the boundary where possible to ensure accessibility, safety and ease of movement.
Mayor Jenkins, I'd like to move slightly different motion, but probably with the assistance of administration in the wording. The intent of what I'm wanting to move is looking at, I guess, that compromise, because I can see where this is sort of going to go, and I think there's the benefit of, I think it's a pretty easy compromise, and I think something that maybe everyone can, I think everyone loses out a little bit, but that's usually means a good compromise. So I'm not sure whether it's sufficient space for allow the bins to be put out, or half a metre, or whatever that little buffer. So maybe it reads along the lines of that the proposed footpath on Cudmore Road between Rapid Drive and Lamont Street be constructed near the boundary to allow sufficient room for bins to be collected where possible to ensure safety. And I'm not sure of the wording. I'll ask the administration.
Jodie, would you be able to assist with that?
Thank you, through the mayor. Are you trying for it to be closer to the curb but leave enough space for the bins?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so you'd need to have probably a metre, I'd say, because the bins are about 750, so a little bit of space. So that would probably, rather than near the boundary, a metre behind the curb.
A metre behind the curb. Yep, where possible.
Where possible.
Yep, I'm happy to move that. Very happy to accept any amendments if any other councillors think that that's too much or too little. I'll definitely consider that.
Okay. So the new motion that you're proposing is that the proposed footpath on Cudmore Road between Rapid Drive and Lamont Street be constructed approximately 1 metre behind the curb where possible to allow sufficient space for bins to be placed while also ensuring accessibility, safety and ease of movement.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Would you like to speak to that? Oh, sorry. Have you got anything more to say about that, Braden?
Oh, yeah, I'll just talk quickly to some of the intent. Thank you. So I very much appreciate that Bob and your street have a particular view, and I really appreciate you coming to council and bringing this. I guess my worry is around it not being that other extreme, but I guess this might be more palatable for. Also, I think you made a good comment about the collection of the rubbish trucks. That's something we discussed last week, and then administration have gone away and investigated that. And pretty much the result is, if the footpath was along the curb, the bins are put off the curb if people remember to do it, noting everyone will naturally put it on the curb. Is that they can be collected, though it can greatly reduce the time that it takes to collect the bins. Also causes a bit of a safety hazard with the arm being extended out. So I guess that if that had been a bit easier and a bit quicker, that probably would have been my preference. But I guess more around not wanting maybe that worst case scenario for you. Hopefully we can find that middle ground, and hopefully it meets, because I really do think, and we've got, as the minutes of the Special Disability Access, our committee that's set up for advising on these things have done a great job in advising, and I commend Councillor Schiller for bringing the advocacy and the attention and being a very strong proponent for access and inclusion. So I think we definitely need to consider that, and that's definitely something that weighs on me heavily. So if it's possible to find a compromise, that's, I guess, my preference with this.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor McKenzie, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely pros and cons to each side of the argument, and there's no correct answer in this case. I do have a question though, in terms of the width of the path. Is it worth going the entire way to the curb with the concrete, so making the path 2.5 metres wide to eliminate the strip of grass going curbside? I know there is obviously a higher cost involved in that. But will that be a significant amount, or was that just adding on a tiny bit?
Jodie?
Thank you, through the mayor. It would almost double the cost of the project.
Cool, no worries. I thought that might be the case. So yes, no, definitely supporting this motion here to meet in the middle and be set back slightly from the curbside.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Henderson and then Councillor Burns.
I was in favour of going to the boundary with this footpath, and my concerns are mainly around safety, not just about accessibility, but safety. Our footpaths are for the whole community, and I always see a danger where we have curbside footpaths. You have mothers with toddlers on foot or children riding bikes. It only takes one little step off the curb onto the road, and there's a potential accident sitting there waiting to happen. So, apart from the bins and the accessibility issue, I think safety, in my mind, is the paramount thing we have to consider. So I am happy to compromise so long as we take the footpath off the actual curbside, because I just see a looming danger wherever we do that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Burns, and then Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased that Councillor Mann raised this. I went down and actually had a look at the street. It became obvious to me that the compromise was the most sensible option. Having a read through the additional information that was provided by administration of having the curb next to the property line and next to the curb had a number of issues. Having it set back with a verge, whether it's grass or stones, so that everyone wins. People can park there, the bins can go there, people can have clear access on the footpath, and it's not impeding the property line or the house. So I'm very supportive of that, as long as it is set back to allow bins to be placed there. And I think that also addresses the safety issue of having a footpath right on the edge of the curb, because I think that's quite dangerous.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
Just a query and then a comment. As far as if we place the curb only 1 metre from the verge, there is a risk that we are still going to have the issue where people use the curb line to park their cars. So I'm just wondering if there was, what was the gap between the boundary and the curb on this particular road, because it varies at different roads, so every road needs to be taken into different perspectives. So that's one perspective as to whether that 1 metre gap is sufficient to allow the fact that people tend to use the curb and footpaths to park their cars on. I'm quite happy to go down this pathway if that's what needs to be done to get it through, but I'm just a bit concerned about whether that 1 metre gap is sufficient if people decide to park their cars on there. Another comment I have is that we have bins that are placed on the curb, and if they're placed on a surface which is quite smooth, you know, we've got a little bit of roughness in the pavement for safety, but when it comes to a wheelie bin, they are already, this is happening on Rapid Drive, they roll into the centre of the curb, and so the 70 centimetres is not an accurate representation what happens with a wheelie bin. We have 3 wheelie bins going out during the summertime, and that's a change that's occurred over the last 20 years. So our footpath policy is over 20 years, probably 25 years old, so things have changed. So I will support the motion, but I'd just like to get some clarification. A, how are we going to police people not parking on the pavement, and is that a sufficient gap considering this particular road? Because it is one of the major roads in McCracken. We only have a small amount. Lamont's probably another road that's used a lot, and some parts of Wattle Drive are, but Cudmore is a feeding road that brings traffic in to those areas, like around, trying to think of the location, but in the area which is not so accessible.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. The next recommendation actually looks at the footpath policy and might actually be able to address some of the concerns that you raised there.
I just asked Jodie Roberts, Director of Infrastructure, whether she has any opinions on the gap that we've placed there as a metre in regards to this particular road, because it is a pretty wide span that we've got for this particular road. Could we still be pushing it even further back?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, it is an offence to park on the verge. So if any vehicles are parked there, they can receive an expiation. There are trees and other things along that verge, even though it's quite wide. So I'd be hesitant to push it back much further than 1 metre. And the normal offset, if a car is legally parked on the road with its door open, you'd normally only need 600 mil to clear it, so it wouldn't be obstructing the footpath.
Thank you. I'm satisfied with that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield, your hand was up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the community in that particular area, putting a lot of effort into this. And look, I also thank Councillor Mann. I believe that the motion that we've put up is a good one. My concern was that when I actually read the report that came from the Waste Authority and a couple of the potential risks that they had encountered, I was quite concerned about that. So I think what we're putting up is, I hope, being accepted by the community in Cudmore.
If there's Councillor Karimbo.
Thanks. Should we not actually consult with the community members to see if they're happy with this decision or potential decision? Wouldn't that be, would we be happy to adjourn this motion, consult with the people, and if they come back, go, yep, this is fine, everybody's happy? We're just assuming that they're happy with a.
I think Councillor Karimba, there's 3 options on the table, 1 curbing, 1 boundary, and we've got a compromise here. We're here to represent the community. We've heard from the gentleman from Cudmore Road who's given us, what his perspective is. And I think as an elected body, we need to get on and, have a think about all of the different opinions, because you're not going to get 100% of people agreeing to one or the other. Listen to all of the opinions and make the best judgment on behalf of the whole community.
But it sounds like the opinions of everybody on that street is that they want the footpath on the curb. Is that not right?
And we've heard
the petition, and that's what you're after, and you're happy with the compromise?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. No, this isn't the time, and Councillor Karimba is quite aware that we don't ask questions of the gallery. It's not part of meeting procedures.
So, and actually,
if you want to put an adjournment motion,
I'd like to put up an adjournment motion. Just it wouldn't take long just to consult.
Okay,
with
does
them.
anybody second that adjournment? That adjournment motion's lost. Can we carry on?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I definitely appreciate Councillor Karimba's views about consulting with the public in this, and I think they're similar to what I'd brought up at the previous meeting around asking them if a compromise would be a potential option. And I think that's led to the deputation, and obviously trying to ask Bob his views around that. And I think with that result of it's definitely a compromise is definitely not the first preference, but I think if from what I understand and where I'm sitting in terms of the safety considerations as well, is that they might not get their first preference. So potentially I think the second, the compromise is that better way. And I really appreciate my fellow elected members and I guess adding their views and finding this consensus with it. I agree that there are still some safety risks, and I appreciate Councillor Schiller's points about the parking on the car, but I guess what I can see of the residents of this street are that they're very attentive, they're very alert with what's going on and very and big advocates. And I could imagine if people started illegally parking or on the curb or on the footpath, I'm sure they would be the first to tell them to maybe move their car along. So I think in terms of that enforcement, I think we've got residents there who are committed to their neighbourhood and their area, and trying to put their best foot forward. And I guess what this process is acknowledging, yes, we represent them and their street and their views, but also we've got those broader safety implications that we've gone through in detail. So I think this is a good compromise that we can hopefully work through.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mann. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And I think that this is a really good example of council really chewing things over. Things don't necessarily have to be either or black and white. We can come to compromises and agreements and through respectful debate and ideas being put up. So I think that's a great outcome. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mann. We now come to the third recommendation, that council review the footpath policy to provide a clear direction to administration and the community on the preferred location for the construction of footpaths, and a draft policy to be reviewed by the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee prior to being reported back to council. Moving that way, Councillor Schiller, thank you, and seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to that?
I said it earlier, but basically our footpath policy is quite old, and circumstances have changed. We now have 3 bins that go out onto the curb, and that's changed the environment that we're having to traverse on a footpath. Once upon a time, we used to have our little tiny tin bin out there on the curb, but things have changed. We've also recommended that it go back to the Disability Advisory Committee to have some input, and we also need to consider things like the Disability Discrimination Act, which was only written about 8 years before our first footpath policy was implemented, and there's been many updates since then. We also need to look at our community plan, and the aspirations that are included in that community plan should reflect in our footpath policy as well. So because of the changing environment over the last 25 years and the increase of awareness, social awareness of that, people throughout our community, every person within our community, whether you be disabled, elderly, a child, someone with using mobility devices like bicycles, which is an increase in bicycles on our footpaths now. And in the future, there may well be other devices that are being used on our footpaths. So we're sort of seeing shared footpaths, and so we need to keep everyone on that footpath safe and come up with a consistent policy so that every time we are placing a retrospective footpath in a street, that we have a clear guidance as to how that should come about.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to this? Does anybody else want to speak to this? I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So we now go back to the adjourned item, which is right at the beginning. And the current motion before council is that council receive and note the petition, propose the footpath of Cudmore Road, McCracken report and attachment. And we can probably take out, if you're happy to, the part that says, and the administration retains the existing design, which includes taking the path along the property boundaries where possible, because the motion that we have just carried related to that compromise, so we don't need that second part in there. So we have had a mover and a seconder before with Councillor Burns and Councillor Schiller. With both of your permissions, Councillor Burns and Councillor Schiller, can we take out that part that after it says attachment?
I'm happy to take that out.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, in the version that I have here, to which I agreed to, has only got that we are receiving and noting the petition. I don't have that second part.
I've listened to the recording in detail, so it is accurate. And I alerted Victoria to the problem with the minutes, and administration went back and listened to the recording.
Yeah, that's why that we looked at the minutes beforehand. Yeah.
So I'm happy that that gets taken out.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and it is that council receive and note the petition, proposed footpath of Cudmore Road, McCracken, report and attachment. Okay. And because we have had some time before that motion, even though Councillor Burns and Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schiller moved it, Councillor Burns seconded it. I'm more than happy for everybody to speak to it again if you want to. But it's really just receiving and noting the petition. Does anybody want to speak to that? No, sorry, Councillor Mann.
Just to again thank the community members for putting together the petition and coming and assisting us with this decision. It does, I guess, as much as a petition sometimes has got a bad connotations, it does assist us with weighing up the different decisions, and I just thank them for the care that they've taken and the advocacy.
I'd agree with you. Petitions, I think, provide us with information that we may not necessarily have about what the community wants. And so I always think when we get a petition that it's really good because it's an opportunity for us to learn more as an elected body. Any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to 5.2. Because we've dealt with 5.1. Yep. So 5.2 are minutes of the special council meeting of the 30th of October. The recommendation is that they be confirmed as true and accurate. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and so thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does anybody have any questions about those minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have another deputation now, and that is we have got Marcus Rolfe on Teams. Hello, Marcus, I can see you there. Thank you. And Kingsley Andrews? Is it Kingsley Andrews?
Andrews, that's right.
Andrews, sorry. And Kingsley and Andrews also. Both Kingsley and Marcus are from Oceane, and they want to talk about the road naming of the roads in Oceane, which is subject to item 12.3 on in your agenda. So after this deputation, we will go to 12.3 so that they can go home and don't have to stay on Teams. And Kingsley and Marcus, you have 10 minutes, which includes any questions that the elected members may have for you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We've decided that I will lead in the interest of time, and Kingsley can come through with any supporting commentary. The proposed development, the urban release at the edge of Victor Harbour that Kingsley and I presented to many of you previously on has been named Oceane. Ocean is a French word meaning from the sea. Oceane is a variation of that word, and it also happens to be a popular girl's name in France and Quebec. We considered that Oceane is an appropriate name for our development for a few reasons. Firstly, there are expansive views of the sea from our site, and the site also enjoys the associated sea breezes in both directions. Secondly,
You have frozen there, Marcus. No, you're still frozen. Have we got an IT person here?
I think he might have to log out and log back in.
Marcus, you might need to log out and log back in. Thank you. Are you there, Marcus? Perhaps Kingsley, you may be able to continue if Marcus is having difficulty getting back in. Would you be able to take off where he left off? Take on rather where he left off?
Look, Marcus is more prepped in terms of the background to the.
Oh, here we are.
To the name. Here he is.
Hi, Marcus.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Let's try a different camera angle, shall we? Or a different camera as it happens. Okay. Where do I get to? I think I told you that we've called it Oceane because of expansive views of the site from the sea. Of the sea, and also the sea breezes that the site enjoys. Using a word of French origin is relevant here because of the French history in the region, i.e. it's referred to as the Fleurieu region, and of course the association with Nicolas Baudin. Thirdly, we were not advised of any constraints imposed on us when naming our development. So we thought we had a fair degree of flexibility as to what we could name it. And we thought Oceane was the best name. Now, where we are now is we're proposing to name one of the key roads within our development, the central sort of spine along the ridge line, Oceane Boulevard. We also propose to name one of the first cul-de-sac type streets running off this road, Oceane Place. There's a little correction in the agenda. It's not the road that runs down toward the river. It's a shorter road that actually runs to the east behind some dwellings that we're identifying as Oceane Place. Now, we contend that these two street names are appropriate for the following reasons. Firstly, it helps people to navigate the local area when the first streets within Oceane share the same name as the name of the development. And that's quite critical for us. Secondly, we don't think there'll be confusion with Ocean Street and Ocean Road in Victor Harbour. Again, our names are Oceane Boulevard and Oceane Place. So they're different in two ways. Oceane contains an additional letter. It's pronounced differently. And of course, Boulevard and Place are additional levels of differentiation. And thirdly, we noticed that there's several existing streets in Victor Harbour with names of French origin, including Baudin Road, Nicolas Baudin Drive, Molian Avenue, Beaucourt, President Chartreuse Place, Crozier Road. So the French reference is already part of the fabric of Victor Harbour. That's what I'd say when it comes to Oceane Boulevard and Oceane Place. The second thing is Riverside Close. It's the first street as you turn off Oceane Boulevard within our site, servicing approximately 30 houses. It's a relatively small cul-de-sac. We're proposing to name that Riverside Close for a couple of reasons. It's close to the Hindmarsh River. We initially went to council staff, we were going to call it River Close, but for those extra differentiation reasons, we thought we'd add Riverside just to make it absolutely clear, and it has a very appropriate sense of place. Secondly, it will not be confused, we believe, with other existing streets that include river. There's River Road, there's River View Road, and there's River Way Court in Victor Harbour. We think Riverside Close is different enough in the two ways, close and side. So that they are the fundamentals. As Kingsley, I'm sure, will echo, Oceane Boulevard is particularly important for us for that sense of place and relationship to the name of the development, which will be a very significant development for Victor Harbour. We're talking in the order of 1,000 houses across this land over time. I'm very conscious of time. Kingsley, do you have anything you want to add?
Oh, Marcus, we did speak about the other examples around Adelaide where
Oh, yes.
similar.
Yes. Just to give you a bit of history too, I did investigate some other similar kinds of urban development that have happened in recent, over the last perhaps 15 years or so. Mawson Lakes, you'd be familiar with. Mawson Lakes, the region there was originally referred to as the Levels. Mawson Lakes, the key entry road to Mawson Lakes is called Mawson Lakes Boulevard. Windvale became Golden Grove. The main road through Golden Grove is the Golden Grove Way. Northgate became Lightsview, and a key road within Lightsview is called Lightsview Avenue. This is really a clear tradition in South Australia, at least, to have some of the key roads within your urban release echo the name of the urban release. We're following that pattern and tradition. We think it helps with legibility for people.
It sounds like, Victor Harbour, the main road into Victor Harbour is the Victor Harbour Road.
There you go. It's a recurring theme. Our development's referred to as Oceane. The main road along the ridge will be Oceane Boulevard. It's not that we're blind to your pre-approved list of street names, and we will try as best we can to incorporate those through the rest of the development. But these couple are particularly important to getting us started.
Okay, I'll ask.
Just one.
Sorry.
Just one last comment. There was some concern about the pronunciation of the name. I just want to assure council that, we've named the community Oceane, and we are spending a lot of money marketing and educating people on where Oceane is and the fact that that is how you pronounce the name. So I don't think that should be a concern of councils. Thank
you. Does anybody have any questions for Marcus or Kingsley? Councillor Stuart Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. My only concern is really where you have two streets with similar names. The others I'm very comfortable with. So, I know it may be a practice in cities or other areas, but we're talking about Victor Harbour, and I just think, Oceane Boulevard, I'm quite comfortable with that. I just think having two streets similar, while the residents could be fine, because you will have other people going to your facilities there, it's a bit confusing. Riverside is not a problem, but we need to keep names fairly unique if possible.
And sorry, just so I understand that correctly, is that a concern between Oceane Boulevard and Oceane Place? Is that the concern you're expressing?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Okay, understand.
Any other questions? Councillor Mann?
Thank you for the presentation. I guess forgive me, I don't know the exact terminology, the E with a little dash above it, is that, have you seen whether that's actually something you're allowed to have in terms of a street name, in terms of spelling with the dash? I just have never come across it before, so I'm just wanting to make sure whether it's something possible.
Through the Mayor, the applicants have advised us they were not going to have the dash. It was just the comments that came back from the Heritage Committee.
Oh, sorry. I think it's just spelt with the dash in the report, so my mistake.
Councillor Karimba, you want to speak?
I don't know if it's just me, but I just use a GPS, so I don't really have to worry too much about what street names are. So as far as I'm concerned, fill your boots.
Any other comments? No. Thank you very much for that. What we'll do now is go to item 12.3, the application for road naming. The recommendation one is that council does not support the requested names, but somebody may want to change that recommendation to council does support the requested names. If they so wish, we can do it either way. Councillor Schofield?
I'd like to change the recommendation to that we support, please.
So the recommendation by Councillor Schofield is that council supports the requested names for undernamed roads as part of the Oceane Stage 1B1 and Stage 1B2 land division. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I will. I chair the Heritage Committee and this was raised and the members of that group didn't see an issue. And I'd also like to mute that I would like to put up a motion a little bit later with a motion without notice, please.
In relation to this particular?
In relation to the street naming, yes.
Okay. What I'd ask you to do, if it's in relation to this particular naming and this particular item, you could do your motion without notice after we're finished with this recommendation, because it's got to do with this, and I think that the proponents that are online may want to listen in. Councillor Schiller, you seconded the motion?
Yep, I'm also on the Heritage Advisory Committee and we're mindful of our policy and we're mindful of trying to respect our list of names that we have, and I hope that the developer will come to us when we get to the minor names. I feel that this is an important development for Victor Harbour and that it makes logical sense for these names to be used on these key roads. You do see it. Woolworths, for instance, they have a whole street named after them. So I'm in support of these names going through at this
What's
time.
Woolworth Street's name?
Not in our city, but Woolworths as a company have a Woolworths Way, which is basically where their head office is. So,
okay.
So there is occasions where a development or a business name can be used in a street name. So, and I don't think if we're using a different suburb name as opposed to Victor Harbour and Oceane Road, which aren't in this suburb, that they will get mixed up.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Mann.
I'm rather confused because in the commentary with this item, we have a statement that the Heritage Advisory Group have been consulted on the proposed names and do not support them for the following reasons, and there are 5 reasons given. And also the commentary from administration points out that we have a street naming policy and this does not sit with our policy, does not fit with our policy. And we do have policies for a reason. So I'm confused because it states the Heritage Committee did not support these names.
Councillor Schiller, you chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee? No, Councillor Schofield. So I'll put that to Councillor Schofield.
We had quite a long discussion. There was no voting on it, as we're only an advisory committee, but it was agreed, and after John Crompton gave us quite a detailed understanding of the name, very similar to what we've just had, we didn't see an issue with it, and that's how I saw the meeting. The only other thing is that the Heritage Committee meeting agreed that we should review our street naming policy. We know we just have, but given in light we have, what, 3 or 4 major developments happening, that we should come back and sit at the table again and have a look at so that we're not getting into this situation, because we've got 4 on the cards at the moment. So that's how we were. There was no vote given. It was a general discussion because we were told as a mental blank, as we're just advisory, we cannot make decisions unless the decisions come from the council, and we do not vote for the same particular reason. So there were no, there would have been some minutes taken by staff, but there was no voting. It would be everybody happy, yes, everybody's happy.
Yeah, you're right in terms of no decisions are made by advisory committees. However, there can be motions that come to council from an advisory committee for the council to make decision on.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, we were told, no, we can't do that.
Okay.
But
We'll follow
I, as an
protocol.
elected member, can raise it from the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller, just to, sorry, Braden, I'll be with you in a minute. As another person on the advisory committee, is that your understanding of the discussion that took place?
I clearly articulated at the meeting that I was leaning towards supporting these particular names, these 3 names that we have in front of us. When you're in a committee, you have to take everyone's opinion into account, and we have to be a collective when it comes to a committee. And I had an opinion, and people have individual opinions, and so that's why it's come back in the way it has, because we've got to just take everyone's thoughts into account and collect them together. So I'm quite happy with the way I handled myself at the meeting, and that's why I've continued to put my opinion here in the chamber, and that's why we have elected members that come into the chamber and put their opinion across.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, you've spoken. No?
Mine was a question,
Yours was
really,
all right, beg your pardon.
because I was questioning what was
Yes.
in the report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Mann?
Just another question, please. With that motion, are we allowed to put the names and the spelling that we're putting up, or what we're supporting? Because it's just a little bit, it's a bit of ambiguity in the report.
If you wanted to make the recommendation more specific to how you want it spelt,
No,
then you could
I guess
have an
it's more
amendment.
around just confirming exactly what we are supporting or not supporting in terms of the names that are putting up, and then how many names as well.
We're talking about the requested names. So the names requested: Oceane Boulevard, Riverside Close, and Oceane Place. My understanding is those are the names that were requested by the Oceane development. They're not on the council's non-clenchure register.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor, I appreciate what you're saying, but I guess in the report, there's 2 names listed, Oceane Boulevard and River Close. We've heard about River Close and Riverside Close. The report says that they can't have 2 street names with Oceane in it. So they need to go back and give us an alternative one for the second road. So I'm just trying to confirm in terms of the motion exactly which names we're endorsing or not endorsing, how many names there are, and the spelling as well, if that's all right.
I'd be happy to put a motion up with the 3 names stated in there, which includes Oceane Boulevard without the symbol, Oceane Place, and Riverside Close as an amendment to the motion. I know I can't do that because I second it. So
Well,
unfortunately, maybe someone else can do it.
If the mover and the seconder added that as a variation to the motion, would that answer your question?
Yeah, just to clarify exactly
Would
what,
that-
I think it's more a variation. Yeah, that's fine. Just so we know what we're voting on.
Yeah.
I'd be happy.
Councillor Schofield, as the mover of this, are you happy to include the names? So council does support the requested names being Oceane Boulevard, Riverside Close, Oceane Place, without the little symbol, for unnamed roads as part of the Oceane stage, blah, blah. Okay, yep. So both of you are happy with that? Yep. The acting CEO has just brought it to my attention on page 183, which is the following page. The paragraph that begins 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, if council endorses the new names. So any alternative motion would need to include, in accordance with section 2191 of the Local Government Act 1999, and that the required notification is undertaken with effective date of the change being the date of this resolution. So that would need to be included as well. You both happy with that? Okay, so the motion will now read, sorry, Councillor Mann.
Sorry, just another question as well. So just on the first paragraph on that page says, if council resolves to endorse the use of Oceane, it could only be used once, not in both the proposed new roads. The applicant would need to nominate an alternative name for the second road. So I guess I don't want to be acting ultra vires in endorsing both if we cannot have both roads named the same thing.
If council resolved to endorse the use of Oceane, then it could only be used once, not in both proposed new roads. So is that, and I'll just clarify with
Through the mayor, that
so you can't have Oceane Boulevard and Oceane Place?
not in accordance with council's policy.
Okay, so that's council's policy, which we're going against anyway. So
Correct.
they could still do that. It won't be ultra vires. That's right. Okay.
Just an example, sorry to butt in.
Sorry, Councillor Schiller, no, I'm going to read out the motion. We know that it's not ultra vires. It is against the council policy, but we are looking at the motion being in accordance with section 2191 of the Local Government Act and that of the required notifications undertaken with the effective date of the change being the date of this resolution, that council supports the requested names Oceane Boulevard, Oceane Place and Riverside Close for unnamed roads as part of the Oceane Stage 1B1 and Stage 1B2 land division. Are you happy with that, Councillor Schiller? Are you happy with that, Councillor Schofield? Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that, Councillor Burns?
Before I had concerns about two names being the same, but in the discussion, it was a good point was raised, which is it's a separate suburb. So I'm very comfortable with two names, even though it's against policy. I think it'll be unique enough because it's a separate suburb of Victor that it won't get confused.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll now put that to the vote. And, oh, sorry, unless Councillor Schofield, you want to close the debate? I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for your deputation, Kingsley and Marcus.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We don't need the second recommendation that council requests the applicant resubmit the application, I don't think, because you've got the okay from council. So that second recommendation is null and void. But Councillor Schofield, you did foreshadow a motion without notice in relation to this.
Thank you. And I only thought of it as we were going through this because at the Heritage Committee meeting, we actually looked at our street names.
Sorry, can you just state your motion first of all?
Okay, so the motion is then that, and I mean, might like some help, please, that council review their street naming policy due to the amount of new development happening in the region.
Yep. Councillor Schofield, I'm not going to take that as a motion without notice.
Okay.
It's not urgent, and I do agree that it needs to be done, but I think it can come as a motion on notice,
Okay.
and that will provide us with enough time to get some commentary from staff about that. And I think that's a really good idea, but I think that we need to. It doesn't need to be done without notice now.
Okay, no worries. It's just that when you look around at the development, we're going to be in strife.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for all of your considerations in terms of going backwards and forwards on the agenda. I think we're back to following the agenda as is, and we are up to, if I can work out where we're up to.
Good night all.
We're up to 7. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions from the gallery, which we don't have any, and petitions we've dealt with. We now come to item 9.1, which is outstanding resolutions, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the report for November. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp and then councillor Burns.
Yes, on the 11th of 12th, 23, OC 4582023 Arts and Culture Centre Stage 1 detailed design and construction documentation. I just want an update a bit more than what's in the papers. The statement was, once endorsed, the revised plans will be submitted as a variation to the existing DA that has been pending since the state heritage listing of the Victor Cinema. So how far away are we from getting the detailed designs and the DA approved?
Graham may be able to answer that one.
Through the Mayor, so the status of the Arts and Culture Centre is that, or the design work for the Arts and Culture Centre is that there was a delay that occurred as a result of the heritage listing, which we know about, of course, and then also council's decision to bring forward some compliance upgrade works. So that's been the focus of the attention. More recently, as the architects have, and there was a level of concept work that needed to be redone because of the heritage listing of the building. So that concept work still needs to come back to council. And the thing that's delayed that at the moment is water pressure testing that we're waiting from SA Water for, so we can determine, so the architects can determine if we need tanks on site. Because if we do need tanks on site, that for water for fire management supply, then that may impact fairly significantly what the floor plan looks like. So we're waiting on those confirmations from SA Water and the testing that needs to occur. So at this stage, it looks like it will come back to council for a workshop with the concept. I think we've got it listed on or around the 7th or the 9th of February next year.
Thank you. And just following on from that, with the fire safety upgrade of the cinema, there's consideration about closing the cinema for a fair while in the new year after the holidays. Is that because of the fire safety upgrades for the whole cinema, or just the cinema number 2, which is upstairs, and an external staircase?
Through the Mayor, that's correct. It's for that project that was triggered by the upstairs cinema and the staircase, but there was also an element in terms of fire escape passage through that one downstairs area as well. Plus there was some upgrade work that we were also still waiting on in terms of the alarm system and some of those technical matters. So that's all part of that work as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you,
councillor
Mayor. Two questions on page 29 to do with 26022024 to do with the Art and Culture Centre Stage 1 design. It's 3 down from the one that Councillor Kemp mentioned. There was reference to some electrical work that has been completed. Could we be provided with a list of what electrical work has been completed, please, so I can actually look at the reports of what was outstanding to see what work was done? And my second question is, could we get a confirmation, again, it can be fine for the February meeting, that the proposed work does or does not require the upgrade of the entire building to comply with new building compliance standards?
Well, the answer is yes to both of those, although I can confirm that the second question is you don't need the entire upgrade for the purpose of the work that council wants to do in with regard to the cinema compliance matter. That was covered off quite some time ago with council when that question came up previously. But we can provide a list of the electrical matters that have been addressed.
Thank you. But what I was talking about is I understand there's compliance issues for the work being undertaken. I'm talking about the entire cinema, if that requires additional work or additional costs to make that compliant beyond what we approved.
The short answer is no. Okay.
Any further questions in relation to outstanding resolutions? If not, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.2, the annual report. The recommendation is that council adopt the 23-24 annual report as provided under separate cover. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Henderson?
Great report.
Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, it was very informative. It had a lot of detail and commend the compilation of the annual report.
Thank you. And it was approved by the audit committee to went through there. Any further questions? Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I noticed there on the contents page there are some errors. I'll read them out. The year in review, 22 to 23. Well, I think it's the wrong year. Should be 23, 24. We've already done 22, 23. And looking ahead in 23, 24, I thought we'd be looking ahead for 23, 24, 25. And the financial statements are listed as 2022 to 2023, not 23, 24. So if the draft document gets endorsed, that goes out with mistakes in it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I'm sure that they'll fix them now that you've brought them to attention. If anybody else finds any small grammatical errors, just sing out and let us know. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of the report was fine. I just had some concerns when I was reading through the CEO's comments about financial management and about financial sustainability in view of reading the auditor's report and the audit committee's report. And I think that needs to be reworked to reflect those concerns.
Those concerns are in terms of the systems update and the internal controls, those things that the auditor talked about. We all received answers to those questions in the elected members update, and I think they clarify that we are doing well, and that there are a number of glitches in relation to the council having to work on two systems at the moment, in relation to both the new system and the old system, which has meant that some of the auditing has been different, and they've had trouble with the auditors being able to get the information that they want. But I do believe the auditors were, the independents were happy with the annual report when it went through the audit committee as being a true record.
Okay, well, I probably interpret it differently, and they're financial specialists. I tend to take their view where they're stating that council has some compliance issues with section 125. I get concerned. Where they talk about financial unsustainability, I have concern. I don't think it was as simple as the two systems. They were making reference to the internal controls. These are issues that have been brought up before, and I had even mentioned a motion previously about getting assistance on the internal audit with an external company to assist, which was voted down. So I just think that to reflect correctly the concerns of our council's own financial specialists, which is the auditors and the internal audit committee, that needs to be reworked because I don't believe it truly reflects the current situation. But it's up to the members of this chamber, their view as well.
Thank you. Councillor Karamba.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pretty sure we were both at the same meeting, the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, and I got a really different interpretation of what you're saying. I don't think things are tickety-boo at all. I'd like to read out the...
Excuse me, Councillor Karamba. I did not say that things were tickety-boo, so please don't put words in my mouth. And I'm saying that the audit committee, the auditors, yes, there were issues that they found, and that those issues were a result of the internal controls not being able to be done as well as they would have liked because of the two systems that were involved. So yes, I was at the meeting as you were too. We were sitting next to each other. So
yeah, that's why I find it a little bit concerning, because their qualified opinion states that the City of Victor Harbor is not compliant in all material respects with Section 125 of the Local Government Act. I don't think that's a computer glitch. That's pretty serious. And we're not going to discuss what was spoken in confidentiality, but there were a lot of issues raised. Even the summary by the chair has raised issues such as that we are potentially looking at, if we continue down the path of not being substantially financially sustainable. So I think it's prudent that we actually go out to the community, and sure, these things are in page 400 or whatever of the report, but to most people just read that glossy little section at the front when it comes under financials. And that, I don't believe, is a true representation of where we are. And I would encourage elected members to actually stop and read this information, as opposed to, and I only just read the email from council as to the reasons as to why they think there's a problem. There is a big problem, and I think if we don't actually start to address it, it's only going to get worse. And we can pretend that things aren't getting bad, but I was really concerned what I heard in that Audit and Risk Committee, and I would encourage elected members, if they can get a copy of it, to listen to it as well, because if we're sending one message out to the community compared to what's actually happening, I think that's, misleading.
Thank you, Councillor Crember. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
I have a question, since this matter's been raised. We have an internal audit officer and support officer for governance. Is that a full-time position, or it's only part-time, and will administration be looking at that to bring it back to chamber to make that a full-time position to address some of the issues that's been raised through the external auditors?
Kelly, can I hand that to you, please?
Through the Mayor, so the position isn't full-time, it's a 0.7 FTE rather than a full FTE, and it's up to the chamber whether or not they want to put extra resources into that. We don't currently have any spare FTE to bump that position up, keeping in mind that the internal control position is there to monitor and audit, whereas a number of the items that the auditors brought up were things that the particular sections of council needed to put into place to allow that auditing and monitoring to happen, that aren't quite there yet in the new system.
Thank you.
The follow-up question, if I may. What's your time frame? Do you believe that you'll be able to fix these issues with the new system?
So through the Mayor, in terms of the issues raised in terms of finance processes, we currently have identified probably about 150 procedures that we need to put into place. We have developed 50. We've got 50 that are nearly complete, and the others to keep going. So our deadline is in time for the interim audit for this financial year, which will be in March, April next year.
Are there any further, Councillor Crember? Have you got a question?
Just a question for who's in charge of the IT installation program, however you want to call it, the project?
Karen, Shane here.
Sorry, Karen, is it? So one thing that was brought up in the Audit Risk Committee was the fact that they believe, or was alluded to, that we've gone live too early. Do you believe we've gone live too early on this project?
Councillor Crember, you're asking that question, which was already answered. That specific question was already answered in the elected member update, which you would have received on Friday, and also an email from the CEO. The answer was no, the project did not go live too early. In a project of this nature, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think you actually said that in relation to something last week. Because the organisation waited until everything was in place before going live, then there's every chance we never would go live. I won't read it all to you because you've got it.
I understand what you're saying. It's just a simple question of the person who was actually in charge of delivering the project, and that person, not a letter, not an email reply from someone who potentially has done the wrong thing. That's all I was asking. It's a simple question.
That person who is in charge of the project provided that information to you and all elected members on Friday. Thank you. Is there any further questions or any further commentary? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I think in terms of this report, it's a good, thorough report of what's been going on, and I think I do appreciate and agree with some of the concerns around what's been identified with our internal controls. There needs to be some more work there, and I think that's from what I've read and understand, no one's hiding away from that fact. And I think one of the big contributions to that is, as we transition from a very old IT system, an old way of storing our data, the old way of collecting it, to this brand new way of pretty much synthesizing all of our information and data. And I guess what I've understood, and I commend our finance team for the work they've done in this very, very difficult task where they've been trying to do business as usual, plus deal with auditors, reports, financial statements, as well, whilst effectively having a hand tied behind their back, trying to operate two systems that don't marry up yet. So I think, I guess I appreciate and agree that there's work that needs to be done here, and I don't think anyone's saying that there isn't. I think there's, that's going to be addressed, and as we get across the IT system more, as we adjust those things that weren't perfect when we went live, which again, when we're dealing with very complex IT systems, there's never going to be everything tickety-boo, I guess, from the word go. But I think noting we've got work to be done there, but I think really don't want to take away from the work that has already been done in the extremely difficult circumstances from our finance team. And I just want to acknowledge them for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? No, in that case, then I'll put it to the vote, and the vote is that Council adopt the annual report as provided under separate cover. All those in favour? Those against? Can we do that again? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those against? 3. That's carried. Thank you very much. A division. Those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson are in favour, and Councillor Burns, Caramba and Kemp are not. That is carried. We now move to 9.3, the financial statements. Council receive and note the 2023-24 financial statements reporting an operating deficit of 3.8 million, a qualified audit opinion in regard to internal controls and an unmodified opinion in regard to the financial position of council. Would someone like to move that way, receiving and noting the financial statements? Thank you, Councillor Mann. And seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Mann, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, no, I just had a few questions first. So I guess from administration, a bit more of an understanding. So the financial assistance grants that we get from the federal government, my take over the years is they've always paid a certain time. I guess, can you update us as to why that may have been different?
Yeah, thank you. Through the Mayor. So we have received advance payments in June every year for the last 10 years, except for one when there wasn't, when there was a reduction and a change. The advance payments should have been received on the 30th of June, but they hit the bank a day late. So they were a little bit tardy coming out of the state government coffers into ours, which meant that we couldn't recognise them as a 23-24 income.
How much was that?
The advance, the gap was around 300,000.
Thank you. I guess, yeah, no, I'm happy to support this. This motion is really a receive and note, but I think it's what the report talks to that I guess is more of a concern around, I guess, constantly already with our financial assistance grants. The City of Victor Harbor gets a lot less than what it should because of how those grants are calculated. And then something like this where we have budgeted, we've planned, we've done everything that the other levels of government are asking from us in terms of being financially responsible, but then I guess they can screw all of that up in a second by just not getting around to doing that payment on time. So I guess that's annoying noting because the community don't see that background, they don't see these reasons or understand it, but we've got to put out here's a deficit, or a larger deficit, and people can spruik that in whichever way they want. So I guess that's of particular annoyance to me, and I guess as well, again, one of the other reasons is those increased depreciation costs, which I understand as well were harder to forecast due to the changes with the IT systems. But again, it's another thing where I'm not sure whether the state government has to depreciate their assets. No. So it's another thing, another responsibility that's put on local government that no one else has to really do. and we're suffering from it and not getting any more funding as a result. So I guess it's just a bit of pent up frustration, if you let me put it that way. But I guess I'm thankful that our depreciation didn't come back as Alexandrina did. Again, another council where our only options are to increase rates to cover all these expenses that are continually put to us. So happy to support it, but that's just a few frustrations.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Henderson?
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of one of the primary things that our community is always concerned about is our debt, our borrowings, in other words. I think it's worth noting that in that financial year, our total liabilities actually decreased by 14% due to a reduction of 2.2 million in borrowings. And I think our community really needs to be aware of that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any other comments? Yep. Councillor Kemp, Councillor Burns?
A few questions first before I make a statement. I'm just sort of looking, basically the depreciation amount for that year was 9.6 million. How much of that was spent on renewables?
Kelly?
Through the Mayor, so in terms of depreciation, it's an operating expense, so we don't directly relate that to expenditure on capital items. But in note 7 of the financial statements, there is a split of the expenditure on new and renewal. Just jumping there. So in terms of asset additions, that for renewals, we spent $2.7 million on renewals compared to 7.2 on new, noting that that $7.2 million in new includes gifted assets.
Thank you. I'm sort of a bit confused about, we raised depreciation, which sits in capital at 9.6. We raised about $5-6 million in operating budget, you know, for maintenance and various things like that. So that's how I was understood and explained to me a few years ago, that the depreciation sits in capital and it can cover off on new and also renewables. But we're only using about 52%. Now, people are saying, oh, we've got to raise rates, but either, you know, we either take on too much project work, which we can't achieve, and we raise rates to pay for that. So we're not spending enough on renewables because we're spending it elsewhere. So I think the Chamber needs to understand that if we want to look at renewables as a major priority for this council and for our community, we need to spend more money on it and less on other areas, and not use the excuse that we have to we have to raise rates. I think that's unfair to the community because of our decision making, because we overspend our budget every year. You know, so I think that we need to be more considerate about how we make decisions with budgets and going forth. So is it possible at this stage, what percentage on our asset renewable funding ratio for this year so far? Do we have a figure for that already? Because we're heading for a target of 95%. Where are we at the moment?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. So a couple of things to unpack there. In terms of depreciation, it's an operating expense. It always appears in our operating profit and loss statement, or statement of comprehensive income. Essentially, it is the spread of the purchase of those capital items across their useful lives. So it's apportioning each year the cost of that capital works across the use of its the use of its life. In terms of renewals, the figure that we need to look at is the planned expenditure in the asset management plans. So if the asset management plans say we need to spend $5 million and we only spend $4 million, we will have a reduced ratio, essentially because we haven't expended what was required in the asset management plans. They're the denominator in the calculation. So it doesn't have any real impact in terms of depreciation, doesn't have any real impact in terms of capital, except we use the funds that have been raised through rates for depreciation to help borrowings. So we use that from a cash flow issue, but it's always an operating one. In terms of the asset renewal funding ratio, I believe there is a slight maybe increase in the September budget review that's later on in this item. But until we get close to the end of financial year, we do provide those key financial indicator updates at each budget review, and it would be using the same denominator for 24-25 from the asset management plans.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I've listened to all the discussions here. I'm happy to note the financial statements. I just have concerns about the council continuing to have an increasing deficit. And I agree with Councillor Kemp that I believe we are raising insufficient revenue from as this council. If we aren't spending it correctly, then we are going to have issues with our asset renewal and constantly having to borrow, which is debt that we're passing down to future generations. And I think we need to revisit. The Audit Committee have said on several occasions we're overspending, and we need to show more constraint and more balance of what we spend money on. Happy if something is urgent, but then we take away something else out of the budget. We don't just keep adding everything as if the community is our own personal or council ATM. I just don't think it's fair on the community.
Councillor Burns, I'm certain that none of the elected members review the community as their personal ATM. I think that's very disrespectful to your elected members, and that I do agree with you that we do need to, as per the Audit Committee, watch having increase in budget. But can I remind you, it is us, the elected body, that actually sets the budget, and that the administration follow the direction that we give them. Is there any further comments? Councillor Corimbo.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm glad you did bring up the fact that we set the budget, because I actually had a discussion with Councillor Mann, and we both agreed that the elected body has very little to do with setting the budget to a degree, because we don't really get the nuts and bolts. We get to deal with all the little pickings on the outside. So if we actually did have some real oversight, then I'd be okay with it, but we don't. That's just the way it is. I get really concerned when I see a word adjusted in front of our operating surplus ratio. These are financial indicators, and when we start to add words in like this to try and make the numbers look better, I really get concerned. The writing is on the wall. If elected members choose not to listen, there's only so much we can do. And yes, we are an elected body, 9 of us, but it goes without saying that that's normally the same 3 people that are ringing the alarm bells and the rest aren't. So that's a voting record that will be brought up in future. The other thing that I'd really want to sort of talk about and reiterate what both other elected members were saying is that we are not spending enough money on asset renewals, and that will come home down the track to bite us in the backside. So I encourage that we start to show a little bit of restraint when it comes to expenditure. Other than that, it's the same old story, deficit after deficit. Nothing's going to change until something changes. So I would encourage elected members to maybe show a bit more restraint.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, you want to say something? Yep, thank you.
All good, thank you. Yeah, no, just I guess some great points raised all around the chamber, and I think just addressing a few other things. I guess in terms of comments around raising rates to fund things. I think maybe I used that a little bit loosely when I was talking about it before. It's more around that's our only option, and it's not just things council are wanting to purchase, where I guess you're looking at there's been 7.2 million spent on new, but a lot of that includes gifted assets. So it's the gifted roads, footpaths, parks, playgrounds from developers that they put in to sell the suburb, and they say, here you go, council, you maintain it, and that comes onto our depreciation. It's something else we've got to fund through our operating, which our operating comes from rates as well. So that's, I guess, something to consider. Also as well, I think Councillor Burns definitely agree we need to be really restrained in our budget deliberations, and I greatly agree. From memory, I know the budget before last, I was trying to remove a bunch of things that we're spending on, but I wasn't successful in that. So I guess there's always going to be competing priorities, from whether it's a park or Business Victor Harbour or all sorts of different groups and great needs in our community. But I guess the sentiment that you're putting forward, is something that we've got to hang on to when we're doing the budget. But again, it's very hard when we have different groups and people approaching us for gardens and all sorts of different things. I guess as well, I guess going to Councillor Krember's point, and I agree 100% around these ideas around when we write adjusted budget, because he's right, the community don't see the nuance around behind it. They just see here's a deficit, here's these results, and they don't, I guess, and this is a generalized statement, and I'm sure there are many in the community who do pay a lot of attention, but they don't see the fact that the state government aren't giving us the little bit of grants we get on time, and that's ruining our deficits further. They're not seeing that the way in which, because for an IT system it's cloud-based and not hardware-based, that's now an operating cost instead of a capital cost, as you know, originally we thought. There's all this complexity and nuance that is very hard to get across to the community, and so I guess as elected members, all we can do is try and put forward and explain that as best as we can, to paint that picture to the community, to explain, yes, there's a deficit of this, but when you factor in this and this, and it is adjusted, whether they listen or whether they take it on face value, that's, I guess, up to them. All we can do is try our best to educate and put out the message and help explain where we're coming from and all the different things we're balancing up. But I guess, yeah, again, I'm happy to support this one.
Thank you. I'll now put that to the floor.
Just a point of order. I've just got a question before we close the debate, if I may, please.
The debate
Clarification question, something I believe Councillor Mann said that was incorrect.
The debate has been closed by Councillor Mann finishing speaking. I now put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. A division, please. All those in favour? Councillor Mann, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Burns, Caramba and Kemp. That has carried. Thank you. So we now move to 9.4, nomination to the Dog and Cat Management Board. The recommendation is that Council endorse the nomination of Karen Rokoczynski and Michael Quinton to the Dog and Cat Management Board. Moving that way, Councillor Schiller. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson. Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a few questions. Has local government always been responsible for dog and cat management?
Yes. Well, the board, for a number of years, 20 odd years, for a long time.
Okay, so it wasn't something, I might have been mistaken. I thought there was something passed down from the state government as an additional control, but that might be something else I'm thinking of. That's all right.
No. Any further discussion? Put that to the Councillor Schiller.
Just to support these two candidates. They'll both do a good job, and I'm sure everyone will support it.
Thank you. I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 24-25 September budget review, which is 9.5. The council recommendation is council adopt the budget review, providing net capital expenditure of 14,199,100 and an operating deficit of 4,353,900. Someone move that way, please. Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and do I have a seconder for that? If I don't have a seconder, that will lapse. Thank you very much, Councillor Mann. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to it? Councillor Mann? No. Does anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Stewart Burns and Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Can we receive a breakdown of which development and the locations of the gifted assets, the 3.5 million that council have got? It'd just be helpful to actually understand which development and which locations. Because I understand, you know, developers do this on a regular basis, unfortunately, but it'd just be helpful to actually understand.
Yep. I'm sure you can.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I just want to ask a question on page 54 of the agenda, asset renewal funding ratio of 95%. The statement here is that net asset renewal expenditure is defined as a net capital expenditure on the renewal and replacement. I thought that that was operating, because that's what you said, I believe. No, sorry, finance manager, that's you put, because when I asked a question about depreciation for capital expenditure, which covers off on renewables, you said it's an operating, but in this statement here, you got it as a capital expenditure. So we raise rates to do our asset renewals as a capital, not an operating.
Kelly?
So through the Mayor, that comment there doesn't mention anything about depreciation. It says net asset renewals expenditure is defined as net capital expenditure, which is essentially the capital budget expenditure less capital income, which is income from capital grants or developer contributions against as determined against what is required in the asset management plans.
Thank you.
That doesn't mention depreciation. Any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. And another division. For Councillor Mann, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. And against, Councillor Burns, Cranbourne and Kemp. That is carried. 9.5, the draft representation report, review report. The recommendation is that Council endorse this report for the purposes of community consultation. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And seconding, please. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to this? No? Anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Most of the report is good. I'm very happy with. There is some sections I believe does not reflect the community desires that have been expressed, and therefore I can't support it.
I just do note that it is going out for community consultations. So if there are things in the report that don't reflect what the community want, they have an opportunity to feed that back. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Community and development, we've got 10.1, the Fleurieu Regional Assessment Panel. I'm happy to do that recommendation on block. If people, are you happy for that on block, Councillor Mann? Everyone's happy with that on block? No? Which part would you like out, Councillor Krember? Divide them all up? First, sure. So Councillor, first recommendation I'll take as read. Somebody like to move that way? Councillor Mann, thank you. Do you want to second that, Councillor Krember? Thank you. Would either of you like to speak to it? Would anybody like to speak to it? Councillor Burns.
I can't support this because two reasons. I'm concerned that administration proposed this. It didn't come from the community or elected members. Secondly, I don't see the benefit in having consolidation of an assessment panel within the whole region. We have some unique request developments within Victor, which is different from other locations, having been on the panel, and I think it's important that we actually keep it separate at this stage, unless I can be presented with some overwhelming benefits, and I haven't seen those so far.
This recommendation, all of those recommendations have gone through Alexandrina and Yankalilla and have been endorsed by those councils. We have one person on a panel of 5 independents, so it's very difficult for the council representative, if you've got 5 independents or 4 or 5 independents, saying one thing, council representative doesn't have a say. We're also looking at shared services between Alexandrina and Yankalilla and here, looking at how do we save money. Should we be funding 3 separate assessment panels, when all they do is look at the Development Act and whether something fits or doesn't fit or needs to be adjusted. Everybody has to be dependent. So for example, if it's around a house that you know, as you know, being on the panel, you have to remove yourself. And if we can share services and have a Fleurieu regional assessment panel, which will still have a Victor Harbour person on it, then that way we actually save money. So if we're looking at our budgeting and sharing services with our neighbours, this is one way that we can do that. But I take what you're saying into account.
Can I just ask a question again? Isn't it also reducing the number of independent experts? So you'll have a consolidated panel. You may still have representatives of the council, but you're actually going to have less independent members. So you won't have the same number of independent members. And the independent members that we have here are very knowledgeable of both the local area and the Act. And I just hate to see a lot of that talent not be utilised.
We actually have got the, I can't remember what's that? Matt Atkins from Alexandrina Council. Matt, would you like to come up the front? Because you may have some information in relation to that. And Graham Pathouse may want to speak.
So just through the mayor, just as Matt's coming up the front, and Councillor Burns, I'm not sure if you're at the combined workshop that we had with Yankalilla and Alexandrina about this particular matter. Okay, because a lot of your questions were raised and discussed at that, and essentially captured within the report. Matt will speak to it in a moment, but just to clarify that it's the same number of members that would be on independent members that would be on the panel, and in fact, most of our panel is one person, I believe, is the same as the 2 people, is the same as the regional panel at the moment. In any case. But Matt will be able to answer some further questions.
Matt, can you?
It needs to go through a process.
Mayor
again,
Jenkins, point of order. Could we go to meeting procedures while we discuss this? Because I understand Matt is not a member of our staff or our council. I'd like not to be included in the discussions while we're having through the agenda items. So could we go out of meeting procedures?
We can go to meeting procedures if that is what the council want, but that is not a point of order, Councillor Kemp. But if you request to go out of meeting procedures and your fellow councillors say yes, then we can. Are you happy to go out of meeting procedures? Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Matt because their council has adopted this? Thank you, Councillor Schiller.
So question and a comment. The question is looking at our own cap and the regional cap, our current members, do we have any of those particular independent members that are actually living in Victor Harbour? Because as far as I can see, there will be no difference between what's occurring in our local cap as opposed to in a regional context if they are basically making a paper decision.
Through the mayor, my understanding is 2 of the 4 members of both the Fleurieu Regional Assessment Panel as currently constituted and the City of Victor Harbour Council Assessment Panel, including the presiding member and 1 other member, are the same. Kate Shiloh, who is one of the independent members, definitely has a property in Hindmarsh Valley. I am not sure whether that's her usual place of residence or whether it's a holiday home.
Councillor Burns and Councillor Prember.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, I understand the thoughts of Councillor Schiller, but having been on the CAP, I can actually assure her that in the assessment, we actually visit the properties physically in location. We don't just, it's not just a paper remote thing. Quite occasionally there is, but more often than not, we actually go and do a site visit and actually go through. At times we can be talking to neighbours and so forth as well. So it's quite comprehensive.
Councillor Prember.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. The first one is regarding the budget implications. Now, I think this idea is partly being sold on it's going to save Victor Harbour money. Is that correct? We're trying to find some savings?
Through the mayor, we're not trying to sell anything here, but there certainly is a marginal saving in council's budget as part of this.
Okay, because I guess the question I have, and if you could answer this, we budget $14,000 a year, but how much have we actually spent in this financial year? Because I don't believe there's been too many of our meetings, therefore not many sitting fees, whereas now, you know, because I believe we haven't had many meetings, have we? I think quite a few have gone through, so we haven't even come close to spending that budget. So I'm just questioning the savings.
Through the mayor, the budget was adjusted this year because there was a reduction in meetings, so it was reduced to $14,000. We're on track to spend about $13,000 at this stage on the assessment panel. So there's a marginal saving that would be provided in that through a regional approach.
Okay, the other concern I have is, I think it may be the next one, but we're talking about removing all elected members off this panel. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct, but I might ask Matt to, or through the mayor, if Matt can answer that one.
Thank you. Through the mayor. No, what was passed by Alexandria Council and the District Council of Yankalilla was to retain an elected member representative on the panel for the duration of the next term. And it was also discussed that the City of Victor Harbor would be the first council member. The first year of a 3-year term would be the Victor Harbor representative.
So one representative representing 3 councils.
There's 3 elected member representatives, but the terms of reference and the Act only allows 1 elected member to be on a panel at any given time. So it would be a rotation between the 3 councils over a 3-year term.
So that's 2 years. Victor wouldn't have someone from Victor Council.
Through the mayor.
If it's rotating.
As a sitting member, that's correct, but there would also be a second year where you would have the deputy member as well.
Okay. Now I read somewhere too in the commentary that it says that by doing this, we potentially, by increasing the status of the reconstitutional regional assessment panel, we may attract, I think it's, and better remuneration will assist in attracting a greater depth of qualified and experienced professionals. Don't you just need to have I think it's level 2 accreditation? So really it's not going to attract any more. You have to have level 2. All your assessors would all have level 2. So that statement really isn't correct though, is it? And potentially attracting people from outside the area, which I would argue that you would probably need someone within the district to, you know, you'd want your assessment panel to have some connection to the area, wouldn't you?
Through the mayor, that's correct. The minimum requirement for a panel member, an independent panel member, is level 2 accreditation. But I'd argue that by having a regional panel, it makes it a lot easier to attract a higher calibre of professionals. So a level 2 accreditation is it's a low bar, let me put it that way. You don't necessarily have to have planning qualifications. You could be an engineer, a landscape architect, a heritage professional. There's a whole range of factors, and what we try to do is look for the best possible spread of experience. And as part of that, we do definitely also look at trying to get some local knowledge and local people where possible.
But by default, aren't you saying that the people we have here aren't of that calibre then?
Through the mayor, no, that's not what I'm trying to say.
No, well, if you're saying that we can attract better people, we're assuming that the people we don't have here are good enough.
Through the mayor, that's not what I'm trying to say. I guess what I would liken it to is the State Planning Commission, for instance, would be seen at a higher level. Doesn't necessarily mean it's got better people or more qualified people, but it does have a broader appeal in that it's represent a broader region as a regional assessment panel would.
So greater centralisation of power in the hands of a smaller group of people then. That's essentially what you're saying.
Through the mayor, I don't think there's a huge distinction from having a council assessment panel to a regional assessment panel when it comes to the actual decisions being made. And the analysis that we've done through the staff here at the City of Victor Harbor and District Council of Yankalilla and Alexandria Council is that the overall proportion of applications approved, refused is almost identical pre a regional assessment panel as what it is post.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Schofield.
Yes, look, I've just got 2 questions. So with our independent members, they have a sitting fee. Do we still pay them travel? So they get a sitting fee and a travel allowance. So when they're travelling from Adelaide to Victor or Yankalilla or wherever, they get a travelling allowance as well as their $600 per meeting. Do that?
Ours don't, through the mayor.
Okay,
No,
no, that's
no,
all right.
It's just the sitting fee that
Okay.
our current one gets.
And the other thing I'm looking on here, and perhaps I've got a conflict of interest here. At the
Sorry,
moment,
Councillor Schofield, if you believe you have a conflict of interest, it is really important for you to declare it.
well, I'm not sure because this is a new policy that's coming up and I may not be the council rep, but I'm looking at page 81 and it actually states that an additional cost is who the council member that sits on this will receive $450 per meeting. Whereas at the moment, the council member does not receive a sitting fee.
Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. The Fleurieu Regional Assessment Panel, it's a paid position for the council member representative. Not all assessment panels are the same. I understand there's probably at least 4 or 5 that I'm aware of, and I'm talking across about 50 panels across the state that don't pay their council member representatives.
And one more question. So say Councillor Henderson is the rep for Victor Harbour and you are doing some assessments at Carrickkalinga or Cape Jervis, then she will be required to spend additional time in travelling down into that area or up to Malang. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Karembo?
Just to get some clarification on what Councillor Schofield presented, which are quite pertinent questions. So that elected member would then be remunerated for that travel?
Through the mayor, yes. When we shifted from a council assessment panel model to a regional assessment panel, which is over quite a large area, and Alexandrina Council extends beyond Langhorne Creek almost to the southeastern freeway, and of course the District Council of Yankalilla is all the way to Cape Jervis. So in recognition of that, we did include a travel allowance, but the figures contained within the report are inclusive of those travel allowances.
Okay. Can I ask, what's wrong with the system we have now? Why are we fixing it? Nothing?
Nothing's wrong with the system now. Our council assessment panel.
Ain't broke, don't fix it. Thanks.
Okay, we'll come back into meeting procedures. Thank you very much for that. It's much appreciated. And there we have a motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Karembo. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Mann, you'll be closing the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that opportunity to hear those questions, and I think some very good points are raised. I think the first one being that we already have a very well functioning assessment panel. I guess noting, there are concerns, there are benefits with it. One of the things we're always constantly looking at is finding efficiencies, or the elusive efficiencies. But I guess what I see this is there is the ability for I guess efficiencies in those some minimal cost savings there. Alexandrina will still be handling the administrative side of it as well, so that's something that will no longer sit with our staff and may free up some time there. I think personally it's a hard one because it's trying to weigh up Victor Harbour and what is best for our town, but also trying to have a more regional perspective that our residents don't just look at Victor Harbour. They work in Alexandrina, they might holiday down to Yank. It's not just this little silo. So any opportunities where we can sort of expand our horizons, look a bit bigger at the South Coast more broadly, I think there's benefit in doing that and going through this exercise. Whether, I'm not sure if it's possible after that 3-year rotation, if it's not working well or we're not happy with that representation, to potentially go away from it. But I think it's worth looking at and going down this path. in terms of, I think there's a development of a plan for the region through this. I think more weight carries with the state government when we are working together with our fellow councillors. So I think there is benefit there, as the report's detailed, in going down this path. And I think I guess weighing it all, I think I am in the view that it's worth considering and having a look at this.
Thank you. I now put that to the vote. All those in favour of recommendation 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those against? 1, 2, 3. Thank
Call
you.
the division, thanks.
Division. Those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. Those against? Stuart Burns, Councillor Karemba and Councillor Kemp. That's passed. Are you happy for me to do the next 3 on block, or do you still want them done separately, Councillor Karemba? Sorry? Which what? Yep. On block? Thank you. Would somebody like to move recommendation 2, 3 and 4 on block? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to those recommendations? Anyone want to speak to them? Councillor Karemba?
I'd just like to point out that I don't think it's just a matter of if it doesn't work out in 3 years' time, we'll just go back to normal, because I think it requires the minister to do a fair bit of work. And what are we saying to the minister is, we tried it, but we didn't really like it. Is that sort of where we're going with? I just don't think, as I said before, I don't think it's a good idea, but at the end of the day, the chamber voted.
Thank you. Close the debate, Councillor Mann. Oh, you didn't vote. You want to speak, sorry.
No, just a question. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's a great point Councillor Karemba raises, and I think it's, with these going from, I guess, that individual to more of a regional approach, if it really was not working, or if there was significant breakdown, or we weren't seeing good outcomes for the City of Victor Harbor, I guess the question, could then we look at changing things, I guess, is the question.
Right.
Through the Mayor, my view would be that, yes, certainly we could consider the Act still allows for a council to have its own assessment panel, as it does for a regional assessment panel to take place. And I'm just getting a nod from Matt as well, so he'd tend to agree with that too.
Councillor Henderson, would you like to close the debate? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, thank you. I've listened to the discussion around, and I didn't support the first recommendation. I don't support the other 3 because when we make change can be good or bad, and there's a risk always associated with change. And we're just concerned that the risk to Victor Harbor, that we have developments that may not be passed in time for the developer or for residents, etc., to have their plans approved. So that, to me, is not supporting our community, because there is a risk there, and there's no evidence that's been put up to say that there'll be no delays in decision making by having 3 councils with 1 FRAP looking after 3 council areas and doing all the approving, because I just think that it won't take place. Thank you.
Thank you. You had a question, Councillor Mann?
Yeah, just another question, which again, I think Councillor Kemp raises a great point. And I'm wondering whether administration are able to keep track of those figures in terms of delays or timeframes, or what that may look like, and so we can compare the models, because I think that's important anytime we're trying something new, is to know what the changes are, what the benefits are, what the disadvantages are. So if it was a thing where we needed to reconsider it, we've got supporting evidence to do so.
Yeah, through the Mayor, we'd certainly think that would be valuable data to keep track of, so we can do the review as required. Yep.
Thank you. You had a question, Councillor Karemba?
I do, thank you, Mayor. Just clarifying, because here under future opportunities, it does say a joint planning board can comprise of elected members or staff of the constituent councils. So we're guaranteeing there's going to be an elected member on these panels. That's 100% going to happen.
That's how the council have just resolved. Cool. So yes, that's how it's going to happen.
Councillor Henderson, would you like to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I believe we should be looking regionally at something like this. It has been stated and noted that the applications that come to our individual council CAP committees has reduced, and that's because of the changes in the submissions to Plan SA. A lot of applications, if they tick all the boxes, go straight through. It's the ones that don't fit that come to CAP. And I think we should be taking a regional approach because there are so many similarities between our regional councils on the Fleurieu. And with regional approaches to these things, it does bring economies of scale. And I believe each council should be looking at that sort of economy all the time.
Thank you. That closes the debate. We're looking at recommendation 2, 3 and 4. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move on to 10.2.
Point of order. I was just wondering whether we could bring Councillor Karemba's motion forward because this is relevant to this policy like we did earlier with the deputation.
One, that's not a point of order, Councillor Burns. And secondly, no, Councillor Karemba is going to be in the room. So there's no need to bring, he's not doing a deputation, there's no need to bring things through. We'll go with this order. The 10.2 is the unsolicited proposal policy and guidelines review. And the recommendation is that council adopt the reviewed unsolicited unsolicited proposal policy and guidelines as provided at attachment 1 and 2. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Mann? No, Councillor Henderson? No. Does anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp and then Councillor Karemba.
Yeah, the policy reads well. I guess you can always do some amendments in it, but one of the ideas that came out, which was a bit of a concern, where community-based members of the community come in and do an unsolicited proposal, not as a developer, but they find that the policy is so onerous against them and the amount of work they have to do. And I thought that when we had our discussion in the workshops that there would be a hybrid version for community members, which is not really doing major developments or upgrades or doing whatever they want to do. So I'm a bit surprised that we haven't got a bit of a version there, one page, to make it more simpler for our community to do something for them. It could be a sporting club, it could be senior citizens club or something like that, where they don't need to go through all this rigmarole to get support. So I'm just wondering if we could adjourn this item. I'll move a motion to adjourn this item for administration to review the document, to looking at some type of community style unsolicited policy for their level.
Do I have a second of that adjournment? Thank you, Councillor Burns.
And sorry, to bring it back to the January council meeting.
Do seconder, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. So we now move to 10.3. The Greater Adelaide Regional Plan Council submission. Their recommendation is that council endorse the GARP submission as provided under separate cover. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconding Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I was quite pleased with the major infrastructure requirements, which was one of my main concerns, and transport have been included in there. And there was a lot of discussion about that feedback to the government, and I was a bit concerned it may not have been as strongly worded, but it's fine, it's good.
Any further discussion? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Corporate and customer services, the chambers chamber technology upgrades. So the recommendation is that council approve in its entirety the project upgrade technology within the council chambers to address key areas of recommended improvement. Total cost of $265,000, including approval to reduce the operating budget by $55,000 and increase the 24-25 capital budget by $55,000, just transferred from operating and bring forward planned capital expenditure. The other part of that recommendation, or if somebody wants to move a slightly varied recommendation, to put budget considerations for next year, so that's done next year as opposed to within this budget year, that can be done also. So would someone like to move a recommendation?
I'd like to move the second option to take it to 25, 26.
Yep, I'll ask, can you please speak to that, and perhaps you could word that recommendation so that Councillor Schiller's amendment is included in that recommendation?
Sure. Through the Mayor, I'm thinking the best way would, if you're looking for it to be a budget bid for consideration next year, or are you looking for it to be
consideration, not necessarily a dead cert?
Okay, yeah, so a budget bid be prepared for 25, 26. Yeah, I'm wondering if the council would be prepared to convert the operating budget of 55,000 to a capital expenditure of 55,000 to enable us to undertake some of those works this year, or if your preference is the full amount would need to be as part of the budget bid, because we've determined most of it would need to be capital expenditure and not the original thought, which was obviously operating.
I'm happy for that to occur, that we use that 50, was it 50?
55.
55 for the initial capital works that are needed.
Okay, we'll word that up and I'll read it out in a moment.
Okay. What, Councillor Mann?
Just a question on that, while that's being brought up, just to administration around if we did defer those works. I guess I know there's some critical issues with the current setup. Would that delay be okay, or would we just be chatting to ourselves in here and no one's really hearing anything?
Aaron?
Wouldn't be the worst thing, but just to put it out there.
Can you answer that?
Trying not to laugh at you, Braden. Yeah, well, actually, we did put this up because of the issues that have been raised by elected members and staff. So there is a risk. There's always going to be a risk that things are only going to get worse, because you know that how bad it is at the minute. So in answer to that, I would agree there would be a risk.
Big risk, little risk?
It's a pretty big risk.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, just a question while we're still doing this.
Yeah.
You talk about a risk. Have you done a analysis of it yet? You've got someone in to actually have a good analysis of the whole system and how robust it is, and will it collapse by Christmas?
Yep, through the Mayor, we have had an independent company come in to do an analysis for us, someone that's been used with other councils throughout the state, and have come highly recommended. But basically, yes, the sound system, the audio will probably fail over, which will be more expensive, because then we'll have to just do band-aids while we're waiting to get it done.
I would have thought before this came to chamber, we would have had that analysis done as supporting evidence of what the current system's sitting at.
There is a risk assessment there in your agenda. And we have a draft motion on the board. So the draft motion is that $55,000 be transferred from operating to capital budget to permit a portion of the chamber technology upgrade project to occur in 2024-25. And 2, that a budget bid be prepared and considered as part of the 25-26 budget deliberations to complete the chamber's technology upgrade project. Are you happy with that, Councillor Schiller?
Yes, and if I get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Burns, are you seconding that?
I had a question before, put my hand up before you spoke, but you didn't see.
I know, I beg your pardon. We need to we'll get a seconder for it and then you'll be able to speak. You seconding that, Councillor Henderson? Thank you. Councillor Schiller, would you like to speak to your motion?
We're all aware that we need some drastic improvements in both the people who are coming in on Teams, and I've experienced that trying to have a briefing session and coming in on Teams. It's really difficult, not just for the chamber, in other rooms like the encounter room. So I can see where that needs to be improved, but I believe because it's such a significant cost, and we've been sitting here in this circumstance for such a long time, that we can sit it out till next financial year. And if we do have a massive disaster, we'll just have to work around it and limp along.
Councillor Henderson.
I'm wondering if in item 2 in this motion, whether we need to include the budget costs.
That a budget would be prepared and considered as part of the 2025-26 budget deliberations. The costs prepared and costed.
We have some costs in the original motion. I'm just wondering whether they should still be included.
Probably not necessarily.
Okay.
Because the costs will be there in the budget bid.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else? No. Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of this because I actually have a quite intimate knowledge of a lot of the issues, and I really appreciate what IT are going through and all the band-aid fixes they've been trying to do. I think people underestimate the effort that they've put in. I think this is a really critical service to the community. I like the idea of a budget bid. I'm probably one of the first people to have concerns about the budget. But I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity when we discuss the budget bid to look at something else in capital that we can offset? So we don't necessarily have to borrow to fund it, but we might be able to offset something else.
I'm sure that we come right down to budget deliberations. Everything's on the table. Councillor Kemp.
I'm not quite sure if this question's been asked or answered, but I'm just wondering what's the 55,000 going to pay for? What do we get for it?
That hasn't been specifically determined.
So we're making a decision on spending money on, we don't know what we're going to spend it on. Again, that's to me is not prudent policy making by elected members.
Do you want to speak to that, Karen?
Through the Mayor, we have had a breakdown of costs from the provider that came through, and obviously they came back with the total cost. If we were going to go with 55,000, then we would be able to determine as an organisation what would be the priorities. So they have listed the things that need to be done. We just need to work out what we can get done in that 55,000.
So it may not make any difference at all, because we need the full box and dice for everything to happen, because it's all about connections and working together. So
that would be my recommendation, but if we only get the 55, then we try and work out the priorities.
This sounds like we're doing things backward, but I do apologise for that comment. But the thing is that we should do a project scope, have it planned out. We know what we're going to spend our money on. We know what is there before we start approving expenditure. And this is the problem we're having with the audit committee and the external auditors saying we are making decisions without proper processes. It's constant all the time, but nothing.
One of the decisions that we're looking at making is that this goes into next year's budget deliberations rather than extending the budget, which the auditors and the audit committee are really clear about. Don't add anything more to this budget.
I mean, we don't need to make a motion to move it into next year for a budget deliberation. We'll just do it when we come around to budget deliberations. You know, we won't lose it. We'll just do it. We don't have to make a motion for it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I guess just to clarify a few things, and what I understands the case where we see it is that exactly what Councillor Kemp said in terms of it seems our IT department have gone away gone to see professionals, got an idea of exactly what the problems are, what the fixes are, what the costs are. They've then come to council and said, here's this significant, here's this risk, which they've said is rather high. Here's the costs. If you want to address that problem now, we can add that as an increase. I think what Councillor Schiller's done is tried to find a bit of a balance between the risk and the cost. The 55,000, as I understand it, is already budgeted for the spend. It's just the move to a capital. So that money has been budgeted for. And then the deferring is everything above it, which I think is a good way of doing it, because it's appreciating what our audit committee is saying about adding in things that we haven't budgeted for. And then what I see this recommendation is doing is it's not adding things that we haven't budgeted for. It's saying we're going to consider it in the next year's financial budgeting process, which again, it's not a rare exercise for council to have a motion that we're going to consider something in our next budget. I can think of, I can't think any offhand, but I know that it's something that has been done before. And so I guess in considering this motion, I think it strikes that balance between, yeah, it's not the ideal situation for the technology and for our IT department. They've got to try and work out what those bigger risk items are and how much they can fix with 55. But I think from a financially prudent way of going about it, I think this strikes a nice balance between risk and financial responsibility.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. You have a question, Councillor Burns.
I do. The 55, if an issue, we defer it and you've got 55 as a buffer amount and things break, obviously you'll come back to the chamber if that's not enough money, but it may also mean that the amount we...
Sorry, what is your question, Councillor Burns?
I just want to check if the amount that we budget or provision for next year's budget could increase if it fails between now and then.
Through the mayor, it could. We're basing this on the advice we've got from the professional consultant, but for the most part, what they're looking at is replacement equipment. We had initially thought a lot of it would be just maintenance and fix, hence the operating budget. So we think we could probably achieve what we need to achieve with the allocation that we had initially recommended.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll go to Councillor Schiller to close the debate. No more to add. In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to 11.2, which is the library hours review. And the recommendation is to approve an amendment to the library hours. I'll take it as read because it's a long recommendation. You're happy to move that way, Councillor Henderson? Thank you. Seconding that, Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to it?
Yes, I think it makes sense to extend the library hours. Our library is one of the busiest libraries in a regional area of this size. It's used by a lot of our community. And I also think it makes sense to have a consistent opening time. We often have people sitting waiting for the library to open when it opens at 9:30. We have people waiting at the door ready to rush in as soon as the doors are unlocked. So I think it makes sense, and especially the extended hours on a Saturday. Some working people can only get to the library on a Saturday, and they may even be working Saturday mornings as well. So extending that time to 2 p.m. I think is a very sensible move.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like, for the same two reasons, introducing consistency in the hours, but also extending on Saturday. I've been here and just seen a number of people that come in and use it, including tourists, and it will just help ease, I think, a lot of the congestion that occurs from time to time, and people can come over a more spread period. And I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. It is 8 o'clock, so we might have a bit of a leg stretch and wriggle around. If we could come back, please, at 8:10. 10 minutes might be enough, and we'll see you then. We're on 11.3, the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority financial statements. The recommendation is that council receive and note them so that the CEO can sign them. As we have gone into the new authority, which is now between Alexandrina and and Victor Harbour, the CEO needs to sign the documents as required rather than the or the chair of the Fleurieu Aquatic Centre board. So that's why we're receiving this. So can somebody move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Angela. And seconded by Marilyn. Do either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Burns, Councillor Krember and Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Whilst I appreciate we are receiving the financial statements, I again get concerned about the contents and some of the issues in there around their issues of swimming lessons, cafe issues, lack of merchandising and so forth. Concerned that the board didn't necessarily help address a lot of these issues with the YMCA. And I think it also puts the CEO in an awkward position because they're signing off on something that they didn't really have any control over managing. But I'm really concerned about the financial state and the prior management of it. So, yeah.
And I think with the new centre authority being established, that's something that the new authority can have a good look at. They've only been established for a couple of months. So really, this is, as you say, based on previous things. Councillor Krember.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick one. Happy to receive a note. Similar sentiments to Councillor Burns. Just a question. Do we know when we're going to have these cost savings? Well, when we can see an indication of when these cost savings are going to start coming through with the new setup?
I think because they've only been set up for the last couple of months, I'm sure they'll all be saying as soon as possible. They need to do things strategically.
We would see review 6 months, 12 months. What are we looking at? We don't have anything. Is that not part of the? No, nothing.
Through the Mayor, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Awesome.
They're still establishing that joint venture committee and getting approval. So they're not sort of in the nuts and bolts of it, but I know that they are trying to get it established as quickly as possible because they're on the same page.
Wonderful. Okay, just one other question too. I know that during the Audit and Risk Committee, when the topic of the Aquatic Centre actually did come up, and I think the question was, the question was, are we depreciating or putting money aside for the renewal of this asset? And the answer was no. I believe Alexandrina Council chose not to, therefore we followed. And I think someone alluded to, one of the staff members alluded to when the question was what happens at end of life, the staff member, and I could be wrong, said we'll just shut it down. That would be a decision of council, wouldn't it? Not a person of the. Yep.
That would be a decision of council.
Okay.
Kelly's not here, unfortunately. She may be able to give you some more light on that.
Yeah.
Councillor Mann, you look like you're about no. But they've gone to inspect a switchboard.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Wonderful. So.
Oh, sorry, there was some information about that in the council member update on Friday.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Yes, with the financial statements, I was just trying to get my head around exactly how much is impacting on the City of Victor Harbour. Depreciation is at 541,950. What's our council contribution towards the Aquatic Centre? I guess it doesn't actually highlight it in the financial statements, it just says income. So
We may need to come back to you on that, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Schiller, you will be closing the debate. But yep, go ahead. No one else wants to say anything.
I have been on the board previously, and now myself and Councillor Henderson are on the new joint venture committee. To be fair to the board, over the previous 6 months, we were basically in effectively caretaker mode with an acting executive officer, and we were not in a position to move forward with strategic decisions because we were just trying to manage the Aquatic Centre and then transition to this new joint venture agreement. So to wonder why this hasn't occurred, that we have found savings. We have now got a joint venture committee established. We're still waiting on some of the technical details regarding our, I think it was our ABN. And as stated before, it was explained quite clearly in our council member update about what we have discussed in our meetings in great detail, our 3 priority things that we were looking at as a committee. And we also have a tour going, I think it's next Thursday, looking at about 3 other aquatic centres with different models for their operating people. We've currently got the Y in there, so we were just looking at all the different options there. So we are moving forward, and we are well and truly aware of trying to make cost savings.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. That closes the debate. I'll now put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.1. That's right. Speed zone review. I understand, Councillor Schiller, that you want to amend that first motion. And the first recommendation is that council support a speed zone reduction from 40 to 30 kilometres an hour. No. Oh, sorry, I believe that you're happy for it to proceed as it is. So the first recommendation, that council support a speed zone reduction from 40 to 30 kilometres an hour for the Esplanade Flinders Parade Victor Harbour between Albert Place and Coral Street, which is the first recommendation. But I am happy to do all 3 en bloc if someone wants to move them en bloc. Councillor Schofield, en bloc. Thank you. Anyone happy to move en bloc? No, you don't want to move them en bloc. No. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. So we have a mover and a seconder for the 3 recommendations en bloc relating to the speed zone review. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Schiller? You're the mover? Oh, no, sorry, I beg your pardon. Who's the mover? Carol. Sorry, it's getting late. You don't want to speak? Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak? No. Councillor Schiller, would you like to speak? Thank you.
I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation. At the moment, the recommendation is only stating that we will reduce the speed limit between Albert Place and Coral Street, which is travelling along the Esplanade and then onto Flinders Parade. Most of the other streets in that area, Oceane Street, Stewart Street, are 30 kilometres, and they were resolved by council a number of years ago to bring the speed down in those key areas where there is the intersection between pedestrians and the road users. This is a heavy area for pedestrians. So my recommendation is that we also include the section to the east of the Crozier Road intersection, this being Albert Place, which would take you past Nino's, trying to think what else is along there, Nino's and Cafe Primo. There is a number of eateries that are in that section, which goes from Albert Place at the Crozier entrance right through to the Esplanade. And at the moment, as far as I'm aware, that is a 50-kilometre zone. I had a look with, not me literally, but my husband had a look the other day, and I can't see that being a 40k zone in that particular little spot. So because we have a pedestrian crossing across from Subway to Nino's, which was redesigned during stage 4, I think, I propose that that small section of Albert Place also be added as an amendment to the original motion.
Does it, I'm confused. The original recommendation is Victor Harbour between Albert Place and Coral Street. Wouldn't that not include, the question is, would that not include the area outside Nino's and
No, because the original motion is taking it from Albert Place on the Esplanade, so that's not including Albert Place, it's including from the Esplanade around to Coral Street. That is all is proposed to be reduced by 30 kilometres, but the section to the left of the Crozier roundabout, I think it would be, down past the car yard and Primo's, Nino's, several eateries along that section is not 30 kilometres.
so how do you want this to read, Councillor Schiller? What we've got. So the amended wording that I've got here is Coral Street, comma, including Albert Place east of the Crozier Road intersection to the Esplanade.
Yes.
All right, so that's an amendment. You want to make an amendment. Do I have a seconder for that amendment?
Can I ask a question first before I second that? Would the wording not be better to say from the end of Stewart Street?
Councillor Schiller?
No. This is, if you imagine you are coming along and you are wanting to turn left into to go down Albert Place on the Crozier Road intersection. Once you get onto Albert Place and you start to proceed, so once you turn left, you know, at other intersections like Stewart Street, you turn left and then within a few, maybe 20, 30 metres, then the 30 kilometre sign applies. So what would happen is that you would be, once you turn left to head towards the car yard and then you start to head into the centre of town, curving around past Cafe Primo, JF&C, Nino's, around the corner, and there's still, as far as I can see, around the corner, and you head towards the Hotel Victor, that is still 50 kilometres. Once you are before that on Ocean Street, that is 30, but as soon as you pass Ocean Street, there is a small section of Albert Place that is still at 50, where people could drive through at the pedestrian crossing, which is a shared area in the township that's been upgraded, where people can scoot through there at 50 kilometres an hour.
Can I just clarify, because I thought I knew what you were talking about, but now I'm not sure I do. When you turn, if you're coming up Torrens Street and you turn left at that roundabout by the Newland Church, is that what you're talking about? That you want that to start at 30 kilometres there from outside the Newland Church? Or down
closer, it needs to occur closer into just that section where we start to come into basically our built out areas. We've got several restaurants.
I know you want that corner, but you want it to start from opposite the Newland Church and Albert. Hang on, too many people saying yes at once. So from opposite the Newland Church.
That's Victoria Street. Our place only starts at Crozier Road. Church there, Victoria Street, Crozier Road around.
Oh, okay, so from Stewart Street.
No, Stewart Street's there. Big
Crozier Road. Okay, as long as
Sorry,
everybody's happy.
Can I put a deferment motion up, please, Mayor?
Defer.
Or defer this because we're doing policy on the fly here. No one knows what we're talking about streetwise. Can we defer this and come back with a proper motion from Councillor Schiller with diagrams? And
we've got a motion on the table already. Councillor Schiller's putting up an amendment. She's putting it up. We don't have a seconder for her amendment. We will vote on the amendment and you can always say no to the amendment because you're unsure what it is and come back to it at another time. But we do have a motion on the table. So do I have a seconder for Councillor Schiller's amendment? Councillor Henderson is seconding that amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? I'll put the amendment to the, you've got a discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, just confirming that my understanding is correct, that the Albert Place pretty much is starting from the front, in front of Primo's, and it's that little extra section that we're talking about in terms of this amendment. To Councillor Schiller, is that correct?
Yes, it's basically taking the restaurant precinct, sweeping around the corner, and then that's encapsulating the pedestrian crossing between Subway and Nino's and the restaurants on the other side of that of Albert Place. But then when you sweep past and you start to head down to past Hotel Victor, opposite you got your whale tail on one side and the Hotel Victor on the other, then that 30 kilometres will take you up to the intersection of Albert Place and the Esplanade, and will encompass a 30 kilometres zone in that little section, as well as the section that's been proposed by administration.
Okay, I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 3. That's the amendment has passed. So now the amendment becomes part of the motion, and the motion has been moved by Councillor Schiller and seconded by Councillor Henderson. And this motion is being done en bloc. Councillor Kemp, you want to speak to the motion?
I'd like to move a second amendment.
You can move a second amendment.
Yep. I'll ask the question first. Is Crozier Road, Coral Street all 30 k's, or they're a different speed limit? Because Ocean Street's 30, Stewart Street, is it all 30 or just part of it?
Stewart Street's 30.
So my amendment is to make all the CBD 30 k's, so there's no confusion about speed limits. So all the internal roads of the CBD becomes 30 k's is my amendment.
I think with the I think we are starting. Councillor Krember was concerned about policy on the run in terms of that small section that Councillor Schiller was referring to, which I think was actually okay because it's just a small section. When we're actually talking about the whole CBD and what roads are in the CBD and not in the CBD, I think that does get too confusing, Councillor Kemp. What I would actually propose is that this whole recommendation is deferred until the next council meeting. If that's all right with, if I can get someone to defer it, then we can actually have that included, that amendment perhaps included as another part, but it better explained from an administrative purpose. Are you happy to move that way?
I'll move an adjournment motion to adjourn this item until the December council meeting. It's only a fortnight, roughly, so I'm not quite sure there's enough time.
Could we do it until January? It's not an
January.
urgent one.
Yep,
Yep.
no, it'd be
Thank you.
great for January. And the reason why I want to adjourn for is because I think we need to look at the 30k zone limit into that integral places of all our stages of upgrade, like stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, will all become 30k zones. I think if that could, that's what we'll be looking at. That's the reason why I want it adjourned.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that adjournment motion?
I have a question.
Just a moment. I'll just get the seconder for Stuart Burns. Thank you. What's your question?
That about the timing of this. Obviously, we've just put in the new pedestrian crossing between the horse tram location, and therefore I assume that administration were trying to hurry that speed reduction down coming into the busy period. So if this motion had have got through, how quickly would have that speed reduction been able to be established? And if so, should we be going to the December meeting?
It's as is in the second part of the recommendation, they would be providing information to the Department of Infrastructure and Transport to support the final authorisation. So it's something that has to go through the Department of Transport first before it's authorised.
All right, thank you.
So we have an amendment on the, we have a motion on the floor to amend this till the January meeting. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. .4 is the Regional Climate Change Action Plan. I'm happy to do that on block. Oh, sorry, 12.2, did I miss one? I beg your pardon. Speed limit review, Tugwell Road. I'm happy to do this on block as well. You happy to move that way, Councillor Burns? And do I have a seconder, Councillor Henderson? Do either of you want to speak to this? No. Councillor Henderson?
I think this is a very sensible idea. I use this road occasionally and I can't see that anyone would even get up to 100 kilometres on that section of road. It's definitely an 80 road.
After talking to the residents up that way, they talked about how dangerous that road is and how people often speed on that road. Anybody else want to speak to this? Put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.3 application. Oh, we've done 12.3. So we go to 12.4 Regional Climate Change Action Plan. I'll do that on block if people are happy with that. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to it? Anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the importance of this, but I would actually be interested to be provided, and all elected members to be provided with, there's been 2 plans to date from June 2017 to June 2020 and 2021 to date. I would like to actually see some statistical based evidence of what percentage of climate change has occurred during that period and what percentage of climate change prevented or impacted by the initiatives that have been done here by this association. I know they have figures talking about what activities and actions they've done. I'd just be interested to actually see some of the tangible benefits on that, because I think it's important that we can sell that to the community and say not only are they doing these activities, but here's the impact it's actually had.
Sure, I'm not sure that you'll be able to get exactly what has happened, but it's about adaptation in relation to how do we adapt, what are we putting into place in relation to increased fires, increased storm surges on the ocean, those sorts of things, but can certainly provide you with any reports that we have. Any further discussion, Councillor Karembo?
Just a question. So the information that this group go off is international figures regarding climate change. Is that kind of where they get a lot of their information? Is it COP or I don't know the name of it? Maybe Councillor Henderson might be more.
I'd have to go back and have a look at the actual documents and look at what they've referred to have a look at that. I'm sure I'm not sure whether or not it's in the documents that we've got.
Okay.
So, yeah, but we can find it and let you know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's going to be any adjustments, considering it looks like now, obviously with the change of president in America, and more than likely he'll pull out of the Paris Agreement. Do we have to double our efforts to compensate, I guess?
Are there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of the Disability Council meeting's been done. So 13.2. Recreation Centre Management Committee minutes. Would someone like to move that they're noted and received? Thank you, Councillor Burns and Councillor Mann. Anyone have any questions or want to talk to them? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Fleurieu Region Community Services Advisory Committee minutes. Would someone like to move that they're noted and received? Councillor Henderson and seconded Councillor Schiller. Any questions in relation to those? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. 13.4, Audit and Risk Committee minutes and summary, 18th of November. Recommendation 1 and 2, I'll do on block. Would someone like to move them? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, and seconded by, thank you, Councillor Schofield. Are there any questions about those minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Subsidiaries and representative reports. We've got the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority first quarter budget review. The recommendation is receiving and noting the first quarter budget review. If someone would like to move that way. Councillor Schiller, Schofield, thank you. And seconded by, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Does anybody have any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few. The first one, before I forget, and it was just a statement that Councillor Mann made earlier regarding gifted assets, and that they seem to be troublesome for administration when it comes to depreciation, all these sort of things. I just want to just clarify, those gifted assets, they are actually required by legislation, aren't they? Parks, open space, roads, footpaths. It's not really a surprise, are they? Like with every development?
When new developments occur, then they have to put in park, you know, if it's a big area, and when they're finished doing their developing, they give those assets to council to look after and maintain. So they then become council assets, and we have to depreciate them as per our normal asset depreciation.
Right, but it's not a surprise because every time we do a development, these things are going to happen, correct? Because it's legislative requirement that we have to have footpaths, roads, green spaces.
Jo, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, some developers choose to do higher spec footpaths, like the exposed aggregate footpaths, which cost us more to replace, so that they can sell their development. Also, some of the parks and gardens, like Starfish Park at the Rise, they choose to put more infrastructure in than what is actually required. So although there are some things like roads that are required, they can put in higher spec infrastructure.
And what stage do we know the specs so that we can start budgeting so we don't get caught out, I guess is what I'm trying to work out.
Through the Mayor, we don't accept the gifted assets until 12 months after the practical completion date. So provided that all of the works passes final completion date, we have an estimated cost of them at 12 months before.
So 12 months, but you would see the plans that would specify roads, footpaths, all the meterage.
Through the Mayor, we see the plans, but we don't know the timeframes of when the developers are going to build them.
Okay, not a problem. I guess my next questions, and these are regarding a safety upgrade that we did near the causeway. I'm not sure what the project was called, but I think Jody would know what I'm talking about. The crossover at the Causeway Cafe. My question.
The pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, the pedestrian crossing. I think the design was done by Tonkins. Can we have a cost or what the cost was from Tonkins for this project? Can that be put on Teams? Is that okay?
Through the Mayor, the design cost only?
Yeah, just what Tonkins charges for doing the design.
Yes.
Yep. Second question. Now, I believe the bollards, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not crash rated. So I'm wondering who signed off on using non-crash rated bollards in a pedestrian crossing that was labelled a safety upgrade.
Through the Mayor, you've probably got the correspondence that Craig Woods has probably shared with you. Do you?
I don't know who signed off on it, no.
So there is no requirement for us to put in crash barrier bollards.
So that was decided on.
There was a traffic impact statement that was done as part of the concept design before it went to detailed design to Tonkins.
Okay, so we can have a copy of that, that traffic management report as well, please.
You can.
Was there any government grants associated with this project?
Through the mayor, no.
None? Okay. And so we are now unequivocally saying that the bollards that have been installed are not crash rated.
Through the mayor, they were never proposed to be crash rated.
Okay. All right. Now, I believe we do have some crash rated bollards at the end of, I think, near the memorial. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, can I read out the correspondence that we provided back to the salesperson of these bollards who asked us why they hadn't been used?
Okay.
Yes, certainly.
As previously discussed, we have used energy absorbing bollards in the past where the risks required at the end of Coral Street and on Adelaide Road. Each site is assessed as part of the design process, considering traffic volumes, speed, direction of travel, type of pedestrian movement adjacent to the road, whether they're walking past, gathering, or seating for al fresco dining, and likely risk assessment. For example, for a drop-off or that was the Adelaide Road example, or a terrorist driving into the crowd. In the location of Flinders Parade, the risk was assessed as low, similar to the standard footpath, and the bollards are provided to match the existing bollards, creating a separation of pedestrians and traffic. Given that there is no level difference to define the difference between the road and the footpath, and to direct pedestrians to cross at the designated crossing point.
Okay. So we're saying.
Can I just ask Jodie, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Interrupt. So the questions about bollards came from, you said a manufacturer of bollards?
The salesperson who sells these particular bollards, yes.
That sells the bollards we used or sells the bollards that they wanted us to use?
Sells the bollards that they wanted us to use.
Okay.
Sorry.
Did you get the same, or they, the person that
Sorry,
gave you
are we inferring
questions?
that this is about a sales pitch? Is that, I thought it was about safety. And if it is about, you're alluding to that it's a salesperson that has made this comment, can we see the price comparison of using the safety bollards that are actually crash rated versus, because I know I'm pretty sure that.
So, but these are questions without notice, and you're having lots and lots of dialogue there.
Yep.
This is more a specific question.
Not a problem. I'll
that-
forward my
that you
questions
want to
after.
do.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And in future, people, if you can forward your questions, if you have got, questions, forward them to administration because they're more than happy to answer them, to include them in the elected members' updates so that everybody is aware of them, rather than taking up time at a council meeting when I'm sure at 8:45 people are starting to feel like they want to go home. Have you got any further questions, Councillor Karemba? Thank you. Councillor Kemp, you've got a question?
Yes, with smaller cruise ships arriving in offshore in Victor Harbour in December and January, is the City of Victor Harbour working with Business Victor Harbour to activate the times that those ships are in here for tourism and to support our local businesses or markets, anything like that?
I'm not aware of that, but I'm sure Business Victor Harbour is doing something like that, and I can follow up with Mark Prisabilla and let you know.
Okay, it'd be great if the city is working with Business Victor Harbour when we've got some great opportunities to showcase our town.
As you know, we meet with Business Victor Harbour once a month, and I'm more than happy to discuss this with them. Any further questions without notice? We now move on to motions on notice, and Councillor Karemba, you have one in relation to the unsolicited bids proposal guidelines. I'm not sure whether or not you want to actually do your motion tonight or whether or not you want something to be included in the deferred unsolicited bids.
I'm happy to defer and add it to the unsolicited bids, the policy review we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Now we go no motions without notice. There is a motion without notice, Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a short one. I was just wanting to put a motion up that the Audit and Risk Committee summary report is posted on the council website. We do the agenda, we do the minutes. The documents are under the terms of reference of the committee, available to the public if they wish to come in to the counter to view it or go to the library. And I just think to assist people, it would be good to actually have the summary report up with the minutes and the agenda as well, starting from the last audit meeting on the 18th of November, please.
Yep, that shouldn't be a problem. Does somebody want to second that? Thank you, councillor Karemba. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further motions without notice? No. We now go into confidential items, so I'll ask the gallery to go home. Thank you very much for